Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. The sterile smell of Atlanta Medical Associates hit Philip Morrison like a cold slap. 5 years had passed since that motorcycle accident, but sitting in this waiting room in July 2005, he felt like that broken 22-year-old kid all over again. Outside, the Georgia heat made the parking lot shimmer like water, but inside, the air conditioning raised goosebumps on his arms. "Mr. Morrison?" Dr. Hernandez appeared in the doorway, his face wearing that carefully neutral expression doctors perfected when delivering bad news. "Please, come in, both of you." Abigail squeezed Philip's hand as they followed the doctor into his office. Her auburn hair caught the fluorescent lights, creating a halo effect that made her look almost angelic. If only Philip had known then what kind of angel she'd turn out to be. "I'll cut to the chase," Dr. Hernandez said, settling behind his desk. He opened a manila folder thick with test results. "The scar tissue from your accident is extensive. Your sperm count is, well, it's essentially 0. This condition is permanent." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Philip heard them, understood them, but couldn't quite process their full weight. Beside him, Abigail's perfectly manicured nails dug into his palm. "There must be some mistake," she whispered, leaning forward. "You said there was a chance, however small." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison. The tests are conclusive. The damage to the reproductive system is irreversible." Philip stared at the diplomas on the wall behind the doctor's head. Yale Medical School. 20 years of practice. This man knew what he was talking about. The motorcycle accident that nearly killed him had taken something else, his ability to create life. The drive home to their Decatur townhouse passed in suffocating silence. Abigail stared out the passenger window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. When Philip finally pulled into their driveway, she turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "Listen to me," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "I didn't marry you for babies. I married you because I love you. You're enough for me, Philip. You'll always be enough." "Abby, No." She pressed a finger to his lips. "We'll get through this together. Maybe we'll adopt someday. Maybe we won't. But right now, all that matters is us." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, tasting of tears and promises. Philip wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe that their love could survive this. That night, as Abigail slept curled against him, Philip stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of that accident. The rain-slicked road, the 18-wheeler that hadn't seen his bike, the months of surgeries, the physical therapy, the doctors who'd called his survival a miracle. He'd been so grateful to be alive, he hadn't considered what else he'd lost in that tangle of metal and asphalt. "We could look into adoption," Abigail had suggested over breakfast the next morning, pushing eggs around her plate. "There are so many children who need homes." "Yeah," Philip agreed, though something in her tone felt off. "We could do that. Not right away, though." She'd looked up at him then, her green eyes swimming with unshed tears. "I need time to accept this, to mourn the children we'll never have naturally." Philip had reached across the table to take her hand. "Take all the time you need. We're in this together." If only he'd known that together had an expiration date. 5 years later, their Buckhead mansion stood as a monument to everything they'd built and everything they lacked. The November air in 2010 carried the scent of burning leaves and broken promises, though Philip wouldn't recognize the latter until it was too late. "Another charity gala tonight?" Abigail announced over breakfast, her fingers dancing across her iPhone screen. She'd grown more beautiful with age, her features sharpening from pretty to striking. The soft girl he'd married had evolved into something sleeker, more predatory. The Children's Hospital benefit. Philip looked up from his laptop where code for his latest project scrolled across the screen. His promotion to senior software architect at Tech Vision had afforded them this life, the 6-bedroom colonial, the BMW and Mercedes in the garage, the country club membership they never used. "On a Thursday?" he asked, noting the date. Don't these things usually happen on weekends? Abigail waved a dismissive hand. Donor schedules, you know how it is. These pharmaceutical executives, they're only in town certain days. She stood, her silk robe falling open to reveal the La Perla lingerie he didn't remember buying her. I probably won't be home until late. Don't wait up. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, and Philip caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume. Something expensive, with notes of jasmine and secrets. Maybe I could come with you sometime, Philip suggested. Make a donation myself. God knows we can afford it. Something flickered across her face, annoyance? Fear? It vanished before he could identify it. Oh, honey, you'd be so bored. It's all air kisses and gossip about whose husband is sleeping with whose nanny. Besides, someone needs to hold down the fort here. After she left in a cloud of that strange perfume, Philip found himself wandering through their perfect house. The formal dining room they never used. The home theater where they used to cuddle during movie nights, before Abigail got so busy with her charity work. The empty bedroom at the end of the hall that they both pretended didn't exist. He'd never said it out loud, but Philip knew that room was meant to be a nursery. They'd bought this house with children in mind, the big backyard, the top-rated school district, the pool they'd installed for future pool parties. Now it all felt like a museum to dreams that would never come true. His phone buzzed with a credit card alert. $47.99 at CVS. Philip frowned. Abigail had mentioned needing to pick up her migraine medication, but that seemed high for a copay. When he logged into their joint account, another charge caught his eye. $89.99 at Peachtree Women's Health. A cold fist clenched around his heart. Why would Abigail need a women's health clinic? Don't be paranoid, he told himself, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next 2 weeks, Philip found himself noticing things he'd previously ignored. The way Abigail guarded her phone, taking it with her even to the bathroom. The new passwords on her laptop. The unexplained charges at restaurants he'd never heard of, always for exactly 2 dinners. You're working late a lot these days, he mentioned one evening as she prepared for another event. Abigail paused in applying her lipstick a deeper red than she used to wear. It's the holiday season. More galas, more donations to secure before year-end tax write-offs. She met his eyes in the mirror. Why? Is something wrong? No, just, I miss you. Her expression softened. I miss you too. After New Year's, things will calm down. I promise. But promises, Philip was learning, were just another thing his wife had gotten good at faking. The December evening started like any other. Philip was debugging code in his home office, the blue glow of multiple monitors casting shadows on the walls. Outside, Christmas lights twinkled on the neighbors' houses, but he and Abigail hadn't gotten around to decorating yet. She'd been too busy with her events. Philip? Abigail's voice drifted from the doorway. Can you come to the living room? We need to talk. Those 4 words, we need to talk, sent ice through his veins. Philip saved his work and followed her to the living room, where she sat on the cream-colored sofa, wringing her hands. She wore one of her charity event dresses, a flowing number that emphasized curves that seemed fuller lately. What's wrong? He sat beside her, noting the way she inched away from him. Nothing's wrong. Actually, it's... She took a shuddering breath, tears already forming in her eyes. It's a miracle, Philip. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. The world tilted off its axis. Philip gripped the arm of the sofa, certain he'd misheard. That's impossible. I know. The tears spilled over, running rivulets through her carefully applied makeup. I couldn't believe it either. But I've taken 5 tests, seen 2 doctors. It's real, Philip. We're going to have a baby. Abigail. His voice came out strangled, barely human. The doctor said, Doctors can be wrong. She grabbed his hands, her grip desperate. It happens. Rare cases, medical miracles. I've been reading about it online. Sometimes the body heals itself, finds a way. Her eyes searched his face, bright with manic hope. This is our miracle, Philip. God has given us what we thought we couldn't have. Philip stared at his wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. The fuller breasts, the glow in her cheeks that he'd attributed to expensive facials, the way she'd been avoiding wine at dinner. All the pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. "We should confirm this with my doctor," he heard himself say. "Run tests, make sure everything's okay with the baby." Her expression hardened, hope curdling into anger. "You don't believe me." "It's not about belief. It's about medical impossibility. If you loved me, you'd trust me." She stood abruptly, hands protective over her still flat stomach. "After everything we've been through, all the pain, and now when we finally get our miracle, you want to poison it with your doubts?" "Abigail, please, let's just think about this logically." "Logic?" She laughed, a bitter sound that cut through the air. "There's no logic in miracles, Philip. There's only faith. And clearly you have none, not in God and not in me." She stormed out, leaving Philip alone with the devastating truth. His wife was pregnant. His permanently sterile body couldn't have caused it, which meant he reached for his phone with trembling fingers, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number his colleague had given him months ago. Just in case. At the time, Philip had been offended. Now, he was grateful. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered, "Porter Investigations." "Mr. Porter, this is Philip Morrison. I need your help." Dr. Rodriguez's office looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago, down to the same motivational posters about perseverance. But Philip felt like a completely different man sitting in the patient chair, waiting for confirmation of what he already knew in his bones. "I ran the test twice to be sure," Dr. Rodriguez said, sliding the results across the desk. "Your sperm count remains at 0. The scarring is extensive and shows no signs of improvement. I'm sorry, Philip, but there's no chance you could have fathered a child." Philip stared at the numbers on the page, each 0 a nail in the coffin of his marriage. "No chance at all? Not even a 1 in a million shot?" "I'm afraid not. The damage is complete and irreversible." The doctor leaned forward, his expression sympathetic. "Is there a reason you're asking? Has something happened?" "My wife is pregnant." The silence that followed said everything. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "I see. Well, there are counselors who specialize in—" "Thank you, doctor." Philip stood, folding the test results and tucking them into his jacket. "I'll handle it from here." His next stop was the office building where he'd agreed to meet Detective James Porter. The man himself was waiting in the lobby, unremarkable in every way, from his average height to his forgettable face. Perfect for surveillance work. "Mr. Morrison." Porter's handshake was firm, professional. "Why don't we grab a coffee? You look like you could use one." They settled into a corner booth at a nearby Starbucks, far from Philip's usual haunts. Porter listened without interruption as Philip laid out the situation, occasionally jotting notes in a small black notebook. "My wife claims it's a miracle pregnancy," Philip concluded, "but I just confirmed I'm still sterile." Porter studied him over his coffee cup. "You sure you want to go down this road? Once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. I'm already living with the knowledge that my wife is carrying another man's child. I need to know how deep this betrayal goes." "All right." Porter snapped his notebook shut. "Give me 2 weeks. I'll document everything: where she goes, who she meets, how long she stays, photos, timestamps, the works. Fair warning, these cases usually get uglier before they get resolved." 2 weeks. Philip wondered if he could maintain the charade that long. Every night he lay beside Abigail, listening to her breathe, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and wondered whose bed she'd been in while he thought she was serving canapes to philanthropists. "I found the most adorable baby boutique today," Abigail said over dinner that night, pushing salad around her plate. "Everything's organic, handmade. I know it's early, but I couldn't resist looking." Philip forced himself to smile. "That's great, honey." "You don't sound excited." She set down her fork, eyes narrowing. "Are you still doubting?" "No," he lied smoothly. "I'm just processing. It's a big change." Her face softened. "I know. But Philip, this is what we wanted. A family of our own." The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. This was what he'd wanted. A family. A child with Abigail's eyes and his stubborn chin. Instead, she was carrying proof of her betrayal, and he had to pretend to be happy about it. "Oh, I have another event tomorrow night," Abigail mentioned casually. "The Literacy Foundation. But I promise I'll be home by 11. We can talk more about the baby then." After she left the next evening, Philip found himself in their bedroom, staring at the pregnancy tests she'd left on the bathroom counter. 5 different brands, all positive. The evidence of her fertility mocking his sterility. He opened her closet, running his hands along the designer dresses she wore to her charity events. When had she bought all these? The Abigail he'd married had been content with Ann Taylor and the occasional splurge at Nordstrom. This wardrobe belonged to someone else, someone who needed to impress. His phone buzzed, a text from Porter. "You need to see this. Coffee shop, 1 hour." Philip's hands shook as he drove to their meeting spot. Porter was already there, a manila envelope on the table between them like a loaded gun. "Your wife has been busy," Porter said without preamble. He slid out a series of photographs. These were taken over the past 10 days. The first photo showed Abigail entering the Ritz-Carlton downtown, arm in arm with a distinguished man in an expensive suit. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. during the Children's Hospital Gala. The next showed her leaving a townhouse in Virginia Highlands at 2 a.m., adjusting her skirt. Another captured her in a passionate embrace in a parking garage with someone who definitely wasn't the first man. "Jesus," Philip breathed, his world crumbling with each image. "How many?" "5 that I've documented so far." Porter spread out more photos like a dealer showing his cards. "This one's Derek Hayes, CEO of a biotech startup. Net worth around $50 million. This is Dr. Keith Lawson, head of surgery at Emory. Makes about $800K a year. Corey Matthews, senior partner at Matthews & Associates law firm. Marcus Chen, real estate developer. And Tyler Brooks, he owns that new restaurant chain, Southern Comfort." 5 men. 5 successful, wealthy men. Philip stared at the images, his wife's infidelity laid out like a business portfolio. "There's more," Porter said quietly, pulling out another set of documents. "And you're not going to like it." Detective Porter's office occupied the 3rd floor of a nondescript building in Marietta, the kind of place you'd pass 1,000 times without noticing. Philip sat across from the investigator's cluttered desk, watching him organize surveillance photos with the efficiency of someone who destroyed many marriages. "Your wife has a very specific pattern," Porter explained, arranging the photos chronologically. "Mondays with Hayes at the Ritz, Wednesdays with Dr. Lawson at his Ansley Park townhouse. Thursdays are Matthews at the W Hotel. Chen gets Fridays at his place in Vinings. And Brooks." He tapped a photo of a sprawling estate. "Brooks gets the weekends at his lake house." Philip stared at the evidence of his wife's double life. Each photo was time-stamped, dated, irrefutable. Abigail entering hotels, leaving private residences, kissing men in shadowy corners of parking garages. The woman in these images looked like his wife, but moved with a confidence, a sensuality he'd never seen. "How long?" Philip's voice came out hoarse. "Based on credit card records and witness statements, at least 6 months, possibly longer." Porter pulled out a notebook. "Want to know the really interesting part? She met them all through her charity work. These men are all major donors to various foundations." Of course, the charity events had been hunting grounds. "I need more," Philip said. "Photos aren't enough. I need to know what she's planning." Porter leaned back in his chair. "That's trickier, but I might have a way. My guy at her email provider owes me a favor." 3 days later, Porter called Philip back to his office. This time, the desk was covered with printed emails. "Your wife's been sloppy," Porter said. "She's been using a secondary email account, bella.rose.marketing@gmail.com, but she accesses it from the same IP address as her regular email. My guy was able to pull everything." Philip picked up the first email, dated 3 months ago. "D. Last night was incredible. Can't wait for Monday. The donation to the Children's Hospital is processing. B. Another, to a different address. K. Your technique is improving. Same time Wednesday, the medical charity will receive my check this week. B. She's combining business with pleasure," Porter observed. "Getting them to donate to look good while also getting other benefits." "This is sick," Philip muttered, scanning more emails. Then one made his blood freeze. Subject, project timeline. The window is optimal this month. All 5 targets remain engaged. Probability maximized with current schedule. Legal consultation confirms Georgia child support laws favor mothers. Multiple potential fathers, multiple revenue streams. Jesus Christ, Philip breathed. She's not just cheating, she's running a goddamn breeding operation. Porter nodded grimly. Keep reading. It gets worse. The next email was to someone identified only as Sister Dear. He still has no idea. P thinks it's a miracle pregnancy. I almost feel bad, but this is my only chance. His sterility makes him the perfect cover. By the time anyone figures out paternity, I'll have legal claims on all 5. Minimum 10K/month child support from each. Set for life. Philip's hands shook as he set down the paper. Her sister knows. She's in on it. There's one more thing. Porter slid over a final document. This is from an encrypted folder she thought she deleted. It's a spreadsheet. The Excel file was titled Optimization Schedule. It contained 5 names with income levels, optimal meeting days based on ovulation calendar, probability percentages for each encounter, projected child support payments per Georgia law total estimated monthly income, $52,000. She turned getting pregnant into a business plan, Philip said numbly. My wife turned her womb into a goddamn startup. Porter's expression was sympathetic but professional. What do you want to do with this information? Philip stared at the evidence spread before him. His wife hadn't just betrayed him, she'd weaponized his greatest pain, his inability to have children, and turned it into a financial scheme. The cruelty of it took his breath away. I want everything, Philip said finally. Every email, every text, every photo. I want to know these men, their families, their weaknesses, and I want to know what else she's hiding. That'll take time and money. I don't care what it costs. Philip stood, his decision made. My wife wants to play games? Fine. But she's about to learn she picked the wrong opponent. The files on Philip's home office desk read like a who's who of Atlanta's elite. Porter had been thorough, compiling dossiers on each of Abigail's targets that would make the FBI jealous. Derek Hayes, 42, CEO of Biogenesis Technologies, divorced twice, currently engaged to a senator's daughter. Net worth, $50 million. Weakness, cocaine habit he thought nobody knew about. Philip stared at the surveillance photo of Hayes, silver-haired, distinguished, the kind of man who graced magazine covers. What did Abigail see in him? Money, obviously, but was that all? Dr. Keith Lawson, 39, chief of surgery, Emory Hospital. Married for 15 years to his college sweetheart. 3 kids in private school. Income, $800K annually. Weakness, gambling debts his wife didn't know about. The photo showed Lawson leaving his townhouse at 3 a.m., tie askew, lipstick on his collar. How many times had he told his wife he was handling emergency surgeries? Corey Matthews, 36, senior partner at Matthews & Associates, specializing in corporate law. Never married, known for his playboy lifestyle. Income, $1.2 million annually. Weakness, insider trading that Porter had uncovered but not reported. Matthews looked like a younger, sleeker version of Philip. Dark hair, athletic build, expensive suit. Is that what Abigail wanted? A more successful version of her husband? Marcus Chen, 34. Real estate developer, son of Chinese immigrants who built an empire. Engaged to a diplomat's daughter. Net worth, $30 million. Weakness. His parents didn't know about his American fiancée, still expecting him to marry the girl they chose in Beijing. Chen's file included photos of him with Abigail at various restaurants, always intimate tables, always expensive wine. Tyler Brooks, 40, owner of Southern Comfort restaurant chain, country boy made good, married to his high school sweetheart. Income, $2 million annually. Weakness. His wife had recently miscarried their 5th attempt at IVF. This last one made Philip's stomach turn. Brooks's wife was desperate for a baby, while he was unknowingly helping another woman conceive for profit. They all have something in common, Philip muttered, connecting the dots. They're all either unhappily married or have complicated relationships. She didn't just pick them for money, she picked men who'd be vulnerable to her attention. His phone buzzed. Abigail texting from her charity event, gala running late. Don't wait up. Love you. Philip checked the surveillance schedule Porter had constructed. Thursday night. She should be with Matthews at the W Hotel right about now. Unable to help himself, Philip drove downtown. He parked across from the W and waited. Sure enough, at 10:47 p.m., he saw them. Abigail, in a black dress he'd never seen, laughing at something Matthews said. The lawyer's hand rested possessively on her lower back as they entered the hotel. Philip gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. This was his wife, the woman who'd cried in his arms after learning about his infertility, who'd sworn she didn't need children, just him. His phone rang. Porter. "You're at the W, aren't you?" the detective said without preamble. "I've got eyes on you. Go home, Philip. This isn't helping." "How do you—" "I'm tailing her tonight. Didn't want you to do something stupid." Porter's voice was gentle. "I know it's hard, but you need to stick to the plan. We're building a case, remember?" Philip forced himself to drive home. In his office, he pulled up the email Porter had forwarded earlier that day. Abigail had sent it to her sister that morning. "Everything's on track. P actually seemed happy about the pregnancy last night. I almost felt guilty. Almost. But when I think about our future, about never having to depend on a man again, it passes. 5 income streams, all legal, all guaranteed for 18 years. We'll be set. We, not I, we." Her sister's getting a cut, Philip realized. No wonder she'd been so supportive of Abigail's sudden interest in charity work. He opened another file, Abigail's credit report that Porter had somehow obtained. 3 credit cards he didn't know about, all nearly maxed out. A savings account in her maiden name with regular deposits that matched her charity event schedule. "She's been planning this for at least a year," Philip said to the empty room. "Maybe longer." The most damning evidence came from her browser history. Porter's tech guy had pulled it from their home router. Searches for child support calculator Georgia, paternity test multiple fathers, pregnancy optimization calendar, and horrifyingly, how to induce miscarriage safely. That last one made Philip run to the bathroom and vomit. Was she planning to actually have this baby, or was this another scheme entirely? When Abigail crawled into bed at 2 a.m., smelling of another man's cologne, Philip pretended to sleep. She curled away from him as always now, one hand protectively over her stomach. "Sweet dreams," she whispered into the darkness. Philip lay awake until dawn, planning his own dreams. Dreams of revenge. "I've got something big," Porter's voice crackled through Philip's phone. "Can you meet me in an hour?" "Bring a flash drive." Philip found the detective at their usual coffee shop, laptop open, face grim. "My contact came through. Full access to her email account, not just the secondary one, but her primary, too. You're not going to believe this." Porter turned the laptop toward Philip. The screen showed a folder structure that made Philip's blood run cold. Baby Project 2010. Previous attempts, legal strategy, financial projections, target profiles, medical records. "Start with previous attempts," Porter suggested. Philip clicked the folder, revealing dozens of emails dating back 5 years. His hands trembled as he read, "Robert, the test was negative again. I'm starting to think this won't work with just one partner. Need to maximize odds. A Robert. Her ex-husband." Another email dated 3 years ago. "The clinic confirmed what we suspected. Robert's sperm count is too low. Time to expand the pool. Miami trip was productive, met 3 potentials at the medical conference." "She's been trying to do this for years," Philip breathed. "Her ex-husband wasn't enough, so she moved on to me, and when I couldn't give her what she wanted." "Look at the medical records folder," Porter urged. Philip clicked through confidential documents that made his stomach turn. Fertility treatments Abigail had undergone without telling him. Ovulation tracking charts going back 2 years. And most damning, a consultation report from a fertility specialist recommending multiple partner insemination to maximize conception chances. This is insane. She turned getting pregnant into a science experiment. "Check the target profiles," Porter said. "She's got full workups on all 5 men." The profiles were disturbingly thorough. Derek Hayes, confirmed fertile, 2 children from previous marriages. Net worth verified through financial disclosure, cocaine habit leverage if needed. Emotional vulnerability, fear of aging, optimal approach, ego-stroking youth, beauty, Keith Lawson. Sperm count excellent per medical records. How had she gotten those? Gambling debts, total $200K, marriage rocky due to work schedule, optimal approach. Understanding listener stress relief. The profiles continued for all 5 men, each containing personal information that should have been impossible to obtain. Medical records, financial statements, psychological assessments. "How did she get all this?" Philip asked. Porter pulled up another email. Your sister-in-law works at a background check company. She's been feeding Abigail information for a cut of the future profits. The email thread between the sisters was damning. Thanks for the reports. Hayes is perfect high net worth and emotional issues. 20% finder's fee as agreed. Just be careful. These men aren't stupid. One suspicious wife and the whole thing falls apart. Sister, don't worry. They all think they're the only one. Men are surprisingly easy to manage when you stroke their egos right. Philip felt sick reading his wife's casual manipulation, her reduction of human relationships to profit margins. But the worst was yet to come. Open Baby Project 2010, Porter said quietly. The main file was a comprehensive business plan that would make any MBA proud. Executive Summary Project Goal. Achieve pregnancy with maximum financial benefit through strategic partner selection and optimized conception timing. Phase 1. Target acquisition, complete. 5 high-net-worth individuals identified, emotional psychological vulnerabilities, mapped sexual relationships established. Phase 2. Conception, in progress. Ovulation calendar synchronized with partner meetings. Multiple insemination sessions per cycle. Current status, 8 weeks pregnant, confirmed. Phase 3. Legal positioning. Maintain marriage to Philip. Sterile husband, perfect cover. Document all interactions with biological father candidates. Prepare paternity suits for post-birth filing. Phase 4. Revenue generation. File paternity claims against all 5 partners. Georgia law allows child support from biological father. Multiple claims judge must order testing projected monthly income. $52,000 minimum risk mitigation. Philip's documented sterility prevents paternal claims. Charity cover story maintains social standing. Sister provides information security. Prenup with Philip protects assets in divorce. She included a prenup protection analysis, Philip said, his voice hollow. She's been planning to divorce me after the baby comes. There's one more thing, Porter said, pulling up a final email dated just yesterday. All Phase 2 complete. Pregnancy confirmed and progressing. Moving to Phase 3. Need to increase Philip's acceptance before reveal. Considering couples counseling to document his excitement about Miracle Baby. Will file papers once child support is secured. Remember, timing is everything. Philip stared at the screen, seeing his marriage for what it truly was, not a union of love, but a carefully constructed con game with him as the mark. Download everything, Philip said, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. Every email, every document, every photo. It's time to show my wife that 2 can play this game. The law offices of Mitchell and Associates occupied the top floor of a Buckhead high-rise, all glass and steel and intimidation. Philip sat across from Sarah Mitchell herself, watching her review the evidence Porter had compiled. The attorney's expression grew increasingly grim with each page. This is comprehensive, Sarah said finally, setting down the files. In 20 years of practice, I've never seen fraud this methodical. Your wife essentially turned pregnancy into a Ponzi scheme. Can we stop her? Philip asked. Oh, we can do better than that. Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. But first, I need to know everything about her previous marriage. Porter mentioned she'd done something similar? Philip slid over the court documents Porter had unearthed. Sarah's eyebrows climbed as she read. Robert Fletcher versus Abigail Fletcher, 2003. Divorce granted on grounds of fraud. Sarah flipped pages. She claimed pregnancy, received $300,000 in a settlement, then conveniently miscarried. Medical records show. Interesting. What? The hospital records don't match her story. She was admitted for a D&C, but the procedure notes indicate it wasn't a miscarriage, it was an elective termination. Sarah looked up. She got pregnant, got paid, then got rid of the baby. Philip felt the room spin. She aborted a baby for money? Appears so. And look here. Sarah pointed to another document. There was another man involved, a Dr. Harrison Wright. He also paid her $150,000 to go away quietly when she claimed he might be the father. Jesus! So she made $450,000 from one pregnancy? That she never intended to carry to term. Sarah leaned back. But here's the interesting part. I know Harrison Wright. He's chief of staff at Northside Hospital now. Very respected, very wealthy, and very married to the mayor's daughter. I bet he'd be very interested to know your wife is back to her old tricks. Philip's phone buzzed. A text from Porter. Call me. Urgent. I need to take this. Philip apologized, stepping into the hallway. We've got a problem, Porter said without preamble. Your wife knows something's up. She just hired a private investigator of her own. What? How do you know? Because the PI she hired is my former partner. He called me as a professional courtesy. She wants him to tail you, find out why you've been acting strange. Philip's mind raced. If Abigail was getting suspicious. What do? We accelerate the timeline. How soon can you get me those DNA samples we discussed? Philip thought about the pregnancy vitamins Abigail took every morning, her toothbrush in the bathroom, the hairbrush on her vanity. Tonight. Good. I'll have my lab contact ready. We need to move fast. Philip returned to Sarah's office to find her on the phone. She held up a finger, finishing her conversation. That was Harrison Wright, she said, hanging up. He's very interested in meeting with you. Turns out your wife contacted him last month, hinting she might need to discuss their past unless he could help with a charitable donation. She was blackmailing him? Attempting to. He recorded the call. Sarah's smile was predatory. Philip, we're not just going to stop your wife. We're going to destroy her. But I need to know, are you prepared for how ugly this will get? Criminal charges aren't off the table here. Philip thought about the baby growing inside Abigail. An innocent child conceived as a financial instrument. He thought about the 5 men being played for fools, their families who would be destroyed if this came out. He thought about all the nights he'd blamed himself for their childlessness while she was scheming behind his back. Do whatever it takes, he said. Sarah nodded. Then let's discuss strategy. First, we need to protect your assets. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, but fraud changes everything. Second, we need to coordinate with the 5 men they're victims to, and their testimony will be crucial. Third, we need to document everything she does from here on out. What about the baby? Sarah's expression softened slightly. That's the complicated part. The child is innocent in all this. But Philip, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that Abigail might not carry to term, based on her history. You think she'll abort again once she gets the money? It's possible, which is why we need to move fast. If we can freeze her assets and expose the scheme before she does anything drastic, we might save that child's life. Philip left the meeting with a war plan and a heavy heart. That evening, he watched Abigail prepare dinner, humming to herself, one hand occasionally drifting to her still flat stomach. She looked so normal, so much like the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. You're staring, she said without turning around. Something on your mind? Just thinking about the future, Philip replied honestly. She smiled over her shoulder. It's going to be beautiful, isn't it? Our little family. Yeah, Philip agreed, fingering the small plastic bag in his pocket, the one that would soon hold her DNA. It's going to be something, all right. As Abigail chattered about baby names and nursery themes, Philip mentally reviewed the plan. Tomorrow, Porter would deliver the DNA samples to a private lab. Within a week, they'd have proof that Philip wasn't the father. Sarah would contact all 5 men with the evidence. And then Abigail would learn what happened when you turned love into a business transaction. Because Philip had learned something from his wife's schemes. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't emotional. It was financial, and he was about to make her pay. The January morning was unseasonably cold for Atlanta, frost clinging to the windows of Sarah Mitchell's office like frozen tears. Philip sat across from the attorney, watching her methodically arrange the evidence Porter had gathered. Her movements were precise, calculated the movements of a predator preparing to strike. Before we proceed, Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of 2 decades dismantling marriages, I need you to understand something. Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your wife will likely retaliate in ways you haven't imagined. Philip's laugh was bitter. She's carrying another man's child while planning to sue 5 different men for support. I think we've already crossed into unimaginable territory. Sarah nodded, pulling out a legal pad. Fair point. Let's start with asset protection. What's your current financial situation? Joint checking and savings accounts, about $80,000 total. Investment portfolio worth $300,000. The house is in both our names, valued at $700,000 with $400 still on the mortgage. Philip had done his homework. My 401k has about $200,000. And your wife's assets? Her salary's about $60,000 a year. But Porter found something interesting. Philip slid over a folder. She's been skimming from the charity donations. Sarah's eyebrows rose as she reviewed the documents. She's been taking a 10% administration fee from every donation she facilitates. For the past 6 months, comes to about $30,000 that I can trace. That's embezzlement. Sarah made notes. Criminal charges would strengthen our civil case. Now here's what we're going to do. First, you'll open individual accounts at a different bank. Start redirecting your direct deposits immediately. Keep enough in the joint accounts to avoid suspicion, but protect the bulk. Won't she notice? Not if we're smart about it. You'll claim you're diversifying investments, maybe mention market volatility. The key is to act normal while documenting everything abnormal she does. Philip watched Sarah work, her legal mind dissecting his life with surgical precision. This woman had destroyed more marriages than 1,000 affairs, and now she was his ally. Second, Sarah continued, we need to establish a pattern of deception. The pregnancy is the smoking gun, but juries like patterns. Has she lied about other things? Where do I start? Philip pulled out his phone, scrolling through texts. Last week, she said she was at a charity board meeting. I checked they didn't meet that night. 2 weeks ago, she claimed her car was in the shop. I saw it parked at the Ritz-Carlton. Good. Document everything with screenshots, timestamps. Now let's talk about the 5 men. We need to approach them carefully. Why carefully? They're victims too. Sarah leaned back, studying him. Are they? Or are they complicit? Men having affairs rarely think about consequences until consequences find them. Some might try to buy their way out, pay her off to go away. We can't let that happen. We won't, but we need leverage. Porter's done good work identifying their weaknesses. We'll use that to ensure cooperation. She pulled out 5 folders, 1 for each man. I'll have my associate contact them individually. Anonymous tips at first, photos of them with Abigail, hints about the pregnancy scheme. Let them sweat a little, then offer them a lifeline. What kind of lifeline? Testify against Abigail in exchange for keeping their names out of the press. Most have wives, reputations to protect. They'll cooperate to minimize damage. Philip felt a twinge of sympathy for the men, then remembered they'd been sleeping with his wife. The sympathy died. What about criminal charges against Abigail? That's phase 3. We build the civil case first: fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, alienation of affection. Georgia's one of the few states that still recognizes that last one. Once we have everything documented, we take it to the DA. Fraud, embezzlement, possibly extortion if she's threatened any of them. She has. Porter found emails where she hinted at going public with the affairs if they didn't donate to her charities. Sarah's smile was sharp. Beautiful. That's felony territory. Now let's discuss your behavior going forward. You need to be the perfect husband, supportive, excited about the baby, never suspicious. Can you do that? Philip thought about facing Abigail that evening, pretending joy about a pregnancy that represented the ultimate betrayal. I've been doing it for weeks already. Good. Keep it up. Take her to prenatal appointments, shop for baby clothes, the works. We want documentation of you embracing this child despite knowing the truth. Judges eat that up, the devoted husband betrayed but still willing to love an innocent baby. I would never blame the child. I know. That's what makes you the good guy in this story. Sarah closed her folders. One more thing. Porter mentioned Abigail hired her own investigator? Yeah. Following me, apparently. Let him. In fact, give him something to report. Be obvious about working late, maybe meet with a female colleague for lunch. Let Abigail think you're the one having an affair. It'll make her overconfident, sloppy. Philip couldn't help but admire the strategy. You've done this before. Honey, I've orchestrated more revenge than Shakespeare. Your wife thinks she's playing chess, but she's using checkers rules. We're about to introduce her to 3-dimensional warfare. As Philip left the office, his phone buzzed. Abigail texting about dinner plans. He responded with enthusiasm about trying the new Italian place she'd mentioned. even added a heart emoji. Sarah was right. The best revenge was served with a side of false affection. That night, as Abigail chattered about morning sickness and baby names, Philip smiled and nodded, all while mentally cataloging her lies. She'd been at a doctor's appointment that afternoon, she claimed, but Philip had driven by the medical building. Her car wasn't there. Another lie, another piece of evidence. "You seem happy," Abigail observed, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Happier than you've been in weeks." "I'm getting used to the idea," Philip said truthfully. He was getting used to it, used to the idea of destroying her as thoroughly as she'd destroyed their marriage. "This baby changes everything." "It does," she agreed, her smile radiant with false joy. "Everything's going to be perfect now." Philip squeezed her hand, matching her fake smile with one of his own. "Yes, perfect." The bank statement spread across Porter's desk told a story of greed that made Philip's stomach turn. 3 accounts, all in Abigail's maiden name, all opened within the last 8 months. The detective had worked his magic again, obtaining records that should have been impossible to access. "She's smarter than I gave her credit for," Porter admitted, pointing to the transaction history. "Never deposits more than $9,999 at a time to avoid federal reporting. Always uses different branches, but look at the patterns." Philip studied the deposits. Every Monday, a cash deposit of $5,000. Wednesdays brought $3,500. Thursdays, $4,000. Fridays and weekends varied between $2,000 and $8,000. They're paying her? Like clockwork. And see these? Porter highlighted several transactions. Withdrawals matching the exact amounts of her charity donations. She'd deposit $5,000 from Hayes, then donate $1,000 to the Children's Hospital in his name. Tax write-off for him, $4,000 profit for her. Jesus, she turned adultery into a business model. That's not even the best part. Porter pulled up another screen. I cross-referenced the deposits with her ovulation calendar from those medical records. Look at the spike in payments around her fertile days. The pattern was undeniable. Normal weeks averaged $15,000 in deposits. During her ovulation window, it jumped to $30,000. She was charging them extra for prime time, Philip said, disgust coloring his voice. Supply and demand, Porter shrugged. But here's what's really interesting. The payment stopped 6 weeks ago, right after she got pregnant. Exactly, except for these. Porter pointed to 5 wire transfers, each for $10,000, all received in the last 2 weeks. One from each of our players. Want to guess what these are for? Philip already knew. She told them about the pregnancy. These are down payments on their silence, or investments in future access to the kid. Look at the memo lines: consulting fee, marketing services, event planning. They're already creating a paper trail to justify future payments. Philip's phone rang. Sarah Mitchell. Philip, where are you? Her voice was urgent. At Porter's office. Why? I just got a call from one of my sources at the courthouse. Abigail filed paperwork this morning. Divorce papers? Philip's heart raced. No, worse. She's establishing a trust for the baby. And guess who's named as potential trustees? Philip knew before she said it. All 5 of them. She's creating a legal framework to tie them to the child before it's even born. If this goes through, they'll have fiduciary obligations that could complicate our case. Porter was already pulling up court records on his computer. Found it. The Morrison Family Trust, established for the benefit of unborn child Morrison. Initial funding of $200,000. Where the hell did she get $200,000? Philip demanded. Sarah's sigh was audible through the phone. Check your investment accounts, Philip. Check them right now. With trembling fingers, Philip logged into their joint investment portfolio on Porter's computer. The balance made him stagger. Half their holdings, $150,000, had been liquidated 3 days ago. She can't do that without my signature. Check the authorization, Sarah instructed. Philip found the transaction details. His signature was on the withdrawal authorization, or at least a very good forgery of it was. The bitch forged my signature. That's a felony, Sarah said with satisfaction. Porter, can you get me the original documents? Already on it, Porter replied. My guy at the brokerage owes me a favor. Philip sank into a chair, the weight of Abigail's betrayal crushing him anew. It wasn't enough that she'd cheated, that she'd conceived another man's child while he believed himself sterile. Now she was stealing their future, liquidating assets he'd worked years to build. "Philip, listen to me." Sarah's voice cut through his despair. "This is good for us. She's getting greedy, making mistakes. The forgery alone could put her away for 5 years. What about the trust? I'll file an emergency injunction this afternoon. No judge will let that stand once they see the evidence. But Philip, we need to accelerate our timeline. She's moving faster than anticipated. What do you need me to do? Can you get into her home office tonight? We need any documents related to this trust, especially anything showing the 5 men agreed to be trustees. She's got a charity thing tonight. I'll have at least 3 hours. Perfect. Porter, I want you to... Sarah paused. Wait. Porter, are you running facial recognition on something? Philip looked over to see Porter staring at his computer screen, face pale. Yeah, I was reviewing security footage from the bank where she opened the accounts. Wanted to see if she was alone. And she wasn't. But it's who was with her that's interesting. He turned the screen toward Philip. The image was grainy but clear enough Abigail at a bank counter, and beside her, a woman who looked remarkably similar. Is that... Her sister, yeah, but that's not the interesting part. Porter pulled up another image. This is from the fertility clinic, 2 weeks before Abigail got pregnant. The photo showed Abigail's sister entering the clinic, alone. Why would her sister go to a fertility clinic? Philip asked. Porter's expression was grim. I did some digging after seeing this. Rebecca Morrison, sorry, Rebecca Walsh, her married name had a hysterectomy 3 years ago, complications from endometriosis. So she can't have children, Philip said slowly. And she's helping Abigail with this scheme because she wants a baby too, Sarah finished. Gentlemen, I don't think Abigail is planning to keep this child. I think she's planning to sell it to her sister. The room fell silent as the full horror of the scheme crystallized. This wasn't just about money. It was about harvesting a child like a crop, with Philip's sterility as the perfect cover and 5 wealthy men as unwitting sperm donors. We need those trust documents, Sarah said finally. And Philip? Look for any communication between the sisters about adoption or guardianship, if we're right about this. We save a baby from being trafficked by its own mother, Philip finished. That night, as Abigail kissed him goodbye and left for her charity event, which Philip now knew was actually a meeting with Tyler Brooks at his lake house, Philip felt like a soldier preparing for battle. He waited 30 minutes to ensure she wouldn't return, then entered her home office. What he found there would haunt him forever. Abigail's home office smelled like her perfumed jasmine and deception. Philip stood in the doorway, heart pounding, knowing he had 3 hours before she returned from her rendezvous with Brooks. The room was meticulously organized, everything in its place, just like the calculated life she'd been living. He started with her desk drawers, tax documents, charity paperwork, nothing unusual until he found a leather-bound journal tucked beneath some folders. The cover was embossed with her initials AM in gold lettering. His hands trembled as he opened it. The first entry was dated a year ago, January 15th, 2010. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. Philip will never give me children. I've wasted 5 years believing in miracles, playing the supportive wife. But why should I suffer for his inadequacy? Rebecca had her chance at motherhood and lost it. I still have mine. I just need to be smart about it. Philip photographed each page with his phone, bile rising in his throat as he read, February 3rd, 2010. Met with Rebecca today. She's desperate for a child, willing to pay anything. We could help each other. I provide the baby. She provides the home. Split the child support payment 60/40ths. Everyone wins. February 20th, 2010. Started researching targets at charity events. Need men who are wealthy, minimum $500K annual income, emotionally vulnerable, discreet fertile, medical records through Rebecca's connections. Hayes' perfect cocaine problem means he won't risk exposure. Plus, his genetics are excellent. Tall, intelligent, no family history of disease. The entries became more clinical, more terrifying. March 15th, 2010, ovulation window approaching. Scheduled meetings with all 5 targets. Hayes Monday, Lawson Wednesday, Matthews Thursday, Chen Friday, Brooks for the weekend. Maximum coverage increases conception probability to 89% according to Dr. Hartman. March 28, 2010. Success with all 5. Hayes was easiest. His ego craves younger women. Lawson needed more work, guilty about his wife, but gambling debts make him reckless. Matthews thinks he's God's gift. No challenge there. Chen is sweet. Almost feel bad for him. Brooks is the surprise rougher than expected, but generous. Philip's hands shook as he read about his wife's calculated seductions, her reduction of intimacy to percentage points and probability charts. But the worst was yet to come. April 10, 2010. Philip growing suspicious. Need to increase affection. Maybe stage a reconciliation. Suggested couples counseling to document his acceptance of miracle pregnancy. Dr. Hartman says timing is perfect, will know conception status within 2 weeks. April 24, 2010. Positive. 6 tests confirm. Now the real work begins. Need to. Convince Philip it's a miracle. Keep all 5 believing they're the father set up trust structure for payments. Document everything for custody battle. Rebecca already decorating nursery. She'll be the perfect mother. Better than I ever could be. That last line made Philip pause. There was something almost sad in it. A glimpse of self-awareness in the sociopathic planning. He kept reading. May 5th, 2010. Philip bought the miracle story. Even cried when I told him. Almost felt guilty, but then remembered he's the reason I had to do this. If he was a real man, none of this would be necessary. Scheduled prenatal appointment at 5 different clinics to maximize documentation for the fathers. May 15th, 2010. The trust structure is brilliant. Each man contributes $10K now as trustees, believing they're protecting their potential child. After birth, paternity tests will be inconclusive. Dr. Hartman will ensure this, forcing all 5 to pay support. Georgia law is beautiful, mother's rights supreme. Philip found a folder beneath the journal labeled Project Timeline. Inside was a detailed flow chart that looked like a corporate presentation. Phase 1. Conception. Complete. Target acquisition, relationship establishment. Optimal insemination window. Pregnancy achieved. Phase 2. Gestation in progress. Maintain Philip's cooperation. Secure financial commitments from fathers. Establish trust structure. Document maternal fitness. Phase 3. Delivery birth at private facility. Dr. Hartman attending. Immediate paternity testing. Results to be manipulated. Emergency custody filing citing Philip's mental instability. Phase 4. Resolution. Child to Rebecca via temporary guardianship. Support payments from all 5 fathers, $50K/month minimum. Divorce Philip with full asset retention. Potential Phase 5. Repeat with surrogacy. The casual mention of repeat with surrogacy made Philip physically ill. This wasn't a one-time scheme, it was a business model they planned to replicate. He found another document. This one a contract between Abigail and Rebecca. Agreement for shared custodial arrangement and financial distribution. The legal language was complex, but the intent was clear. Rebecca would raise the child while Abigail collected support payments. The split was 60/40ths, as mentioned in the journal, with provisions for Abigail to retain visitiation rights that she clearly never intended to exercise. Philip's phone buzzed. Porter texting. Her car just left Brooks' place. You have 45 minutes max. Working quickly, Philip photographed everything, then discovered a hidden folder taped to the back of a drawer. Inside were medical records, not Abigail's, but the 5 men's. Complete fertility workups, STD tests, genetic screenings. The level of invasion was staggering. A sticky note was attached to Hayes's file. Highest sperm count. Preferred genetics. Focus efforts here. Another note on Brooks's file. Vasectomy reversed 2009. Desperate for children. Most emotionally vulnerable. The final document made Philip's blood run cold. It was a letter from Dr. Hartman on official letterhead. Dear Miss Morrison, as discussed, I can ensure the paternity results remain inconclusive through proper sample handling. My fee of $50,000 covers all testing and documentation. Additionally, I can provide medical testimony regarding the impossibility of determining father among multiple candidates. Please note, this arrangement depends on your discretion. Any disclosure would result in immediate termination of our agreement. Philip photographed the letter, his mind racing. This went beyond simple fraud. This was a conspiracy involving medical professionals, legal manipulation, and the commodification of human life. His phone buzzed again. Porter. She's 20 minutes out. Get out now. Philip carefully returned everything to its exact position, using the photos he'd taken at the start to ensure nothing looked disturbed. As he closed the journal, one final entry caught his eye, dated just yesterday. Everything is falling into place. Philip suspects nothing. The men are competing to give me money. Rebecca has the nursery ready. In 6 months, I'll be free, rich, childless, and ready to start over. Maybe Paris. Always wanted to live in Paris. Philip left the office, his phone heavy with evidence that would destroy multiple lives. As he settled onto the couch with a book, playing the oblivious husband, he thought about the baby growing inside Abigail, an innocent life conceived in calculation, destined to be a commodity in its mother's twisted game. When Abigail came home, smelling of another man's cologne and false apologies about the boring charity auction, Philip smiled and asked about her day. She curled against him on the couch, one hand on her stomach, and told him about feeling the baby move for the first time. "Isn't it amazing?" she whispered. "Our little miracle?" "Amazing," Philip agreed, his arm around the woman who documented his destruction like a science experiment. Absolutely amazing. The private laboratory occupied a nondescript building in Decatur, the kind of place you'd drive past 1,000 times without noticing. Philip sat in his car, staring at the envelope in his hands. Inside were strands of Abigail's hair, carefully collected from her brush, and a swab from a pregnancy test she'd carelessly thrown away, the evidence that would prove what he already knew but needed to confirm. "Mr. Morrison?" A young technician appeared at his window. "Dr. Carlyle is ready for you." The lab was spotless, all white walls and stainless steel. Dr. Carlyle, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind thick glasses, reviewed his paperwork. "This is a delicate situation," she said carefully. "You understand that without the mother's consent, these results can't be used in court?" "My lawyer says there are ways around that," Philip replied. "Right now, I just need to know. The samples are sufficient for testing. We'll run a comparison between your DNA and the fetal DNA extracted from the pregnancy test. Results will be ready in 72 hours. Can you put a rush on it?" Dr. Carlyle studied him with sympathy. "Suspecting infidelity is painful, but Mr. Morrison, are you prepared for confirmation? Sometimes not knowing is—" "I already know," Philip interrupted. "I'm sterile, have been for 5 years. This test is just documentation." Her expression shifted to understanding. "I see. In that case, we'll have results tomorrow afternoon." The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Philip went through the motions work, dinner with Abigail, pretending to be excited as she showed him baby clothes she'd bought online, all while knowing that within hours he'd have scientific proof of her betrayal. "You're quiet tonight," Abigail observed over dinner. "Everything okay at work?" "Just thinking about the future," Philip said honestly, "how everything's going to change." She reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Change for the better. I know the pregnancy was a shock, but Philip, we're going to be so happy. The 3 of us." "Yeah," Philip agreed, noting how easily lies fell from her lips. "The 3 of us." That night, Abigail's phone buzzed constantly with texts. She claimed it was about organizing a fundraiser, but Philip caught glimpses of the messages. 5 different conversations, 5 different men, all being stringed along with promises and ultrasound photos. The next afternoon, Philip sat in Dr. Carlyle's office as she slid the results across the desk. "Probability of paternity, 0%, she said gently. "I ran the test 3 times to be certain. You are definitively not the father of this child." Philip stared at the paper, scientific confirmation of his wife's betrayal reduced to numbers and graphs. "Can you tell who the father is from the fetal DNA?" "Not without comparison samples from potential fathers. But Mr. Morrison." She hesitated. "There's something unusual in the results." "Unusual how?" "The fetal DNA shows markers consistent with mixed ethnicity specifically, strong East Asian components. Are you or your wife of Asian descent? Philip thought of Marcus Chen, the real estate developer with the winning smile and trusting nature. No, we're not. Then the biological father likely is. This might help narrow down possibilities if you pursue further testing. Philip left with the results, calling Sarah immediately. Perfect, his lawyer said. Chen is the father. This actually helps us. He's engaged to a diplomat's daughter. He'll be highly motivated to cooperate rather than face international scandal. What's next? Porter's been busy. He's made contact with all 5 men anonymously. Tomorrow, they'll each receive a package with select evidence. Then we give them 48 hours to sweat before making our offer. What about Abigail? Let her think she's winning. In fact, be extra supportive. Take her to a prenatal appointment if you can. We want documentation of you embracing this pregnancy despite knowing the truth. As if on cue, Abigail texted him, "Ultrasound appointment at 3 p.m. Thursday. Can you make it?" Philip responded, "Wouldn't miss it. Can't wait to see our baby." Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the February sun making Atlanta feel like spring. Philip met Abigail at the clinic, playing the excited father Tobe perfectly. She practically glowed, whether from pregnancy or the thrill of her deception, he couldn't tell. "There's your baby," the technician announced, moving the ultrasound wand over Abigail's stomach. "Healthy heartbeat, measuring right on track at 14 weeks. Philip stared at the screen, at the tiny life that represented so much betrayal and greed. Despite everything, he felt a pang of sadness for the child. "It's beautiful," Abigail whispered, tears in her eyes. Were they real, or just another performance? "Would you like to know the gender?" the technician asked. "Yes," Abigail said quickly, then glanced at Philip. "I mean, if you want to." "Sure," Philip agreed. "Congratulations. You're having a boy. A son, someone's son, but not his." Philip watched Abigail's face transform with what looked like genuine joy. For a moment, she seemed like the woman he'd married, the one who'd held him after the accident and promised they'd face anything together. "A boy," she breathed. "Philip, we're having a son." "Yeah," he managed, throat tight. "A son." After the appointment, Abigail was effervescent, chattering about names and nursery themes. She didn't notice Philip carefully pocketing the ultrasound photos and visit summary more evidence for Sarah's files. "I need to share the news," Abigail said, pulling out her phone. "My sister will be so excited." Philip watched her text rapidly, knowing she was likely informing 5 anxious fathers about their potential son. The casual cruelty of it, letting each man believe he might be the father while planning to bleed them all dry, still took his breath away. That evening, Porter called with an update. The packages were delivered. Hayes immediately called his lawyer. Lawson's wife found his and kicked him out. Matthews is trying to track down who sent it. Chen called off his engagement. And Brooks. Porter paused. "Brooks attempted suicide. He's in the hospital." "Jesus," Philip breathed. "Is he okay?" "Stable. Turns out his wife can't have children, and he thought Abigail was his chance at fatherhood. Finding out about the others, the scheme, it broke him." The weight of Abigail's cruelty pressed down on Philip. Her greed hadn't just destroyed marriages, it was destroying lives. "Sarah wants to move fast now," Porter continued. "With Brooks in the hospital, the media might get wind of this. We need to control the narrative." "What does she recommend?" "The nuclear option. Full exposure at a single event where all parties are present. She's arranging a meeting at her office, ostensibly to discuss the trust. All 5 men, Abigail and you. That's when we drop the bomb." Philip thought about it. One moment of complete revelation, all cards on the table, all lies exposed. When? Monday. 4 days to get everything in order. 4 days to continue pretending. 4 days to perfect his performance. 4 days until Abigail's carefully constructed world came crashing down. "Oh, Philip," Porter added, "one more thing. That Dr. Hartman Abigail's been working with? His medical license was revoked in New York 5 years ago for falsifying paternity tests. He's been practicing illegally in Georgia under a slightly different name. Another piece of the puzzle. Another criminal in Abigail's network." Philip wondered how deep this rabbit hole went. That night, as Abigail slept beside him, one hand protectively over her growing belly, Philip stared at the ceiling and thought about justice. Not revenge, he'd moved past that. This was about stopping a woman who viewed pregnancy as a profit center and men as ATMs. In 4 days, she'd learned that some transactions came with a price too high to pay, and Philip would be there to watch her empire of lies collapse, one DNA test at a time. The Wells Fargo branch in Buckhead hummed with Monday morning activity, but Philip felt like he was moving through a dream. Each step toward the bank manager's office carried the weight of finality. This was it, the beginning of the end of his marriage. Mr. Morrison, the manager, a thin man named Gerald, greeted him with professional courtesy. "How can we help you today?" "I need to open individual accounts and transfer funds from my joint accounts," Philip said, sliding over the paperwork Sarah had prepared. "Everything's here: power of attorney, documentation, asset division calculations." Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly as he reviewed the documents. He'd clearly seen his share of divorces, but the meticulous preparation seemed to impress him. "This is quite thorough. May I ask—" "My wife is having an affair," Philip said simply. The lie came easily now. The truth was too bizarre for casual conversation. "My attorney advised protecting my assets before filing." "Of course. We see this situation more often than you'd think." Gerald began typing. "The transfers will be complete within 24 hours. We'll maintain minimum balances in the joint accounts to avoid triggering alerts." As Philip watched his financial life being surgically separated from Abigail's, his phone buzzed. Sarah Mitchell. "Can you talk?" she asked when he stepped outside to answer. "Yeah, just finished at the bank." "Good. I've made contact with 4 of the 5 men. Hayes, Matthews, Chen, and Lawson have all agreed to meet. They're scared, Philip. The evidence packages did their job." "What about Brooks?" Sarah's pause spoke volumes. "Still in the hospital. His wife is talking to divorce lawyers, but his attorney will represent him at the meeting." Philip leaned against his car, February sun warming his face despite the cold wind. "When?" "Thursday. My conference room, 2 p.m. I've told them it's to discuss a delicate legal matter involving mutual interests. They think they're coming to strategize damage control. They have no idea you'll be there." "And Abigail?" "That's the beautiful part. She's already accepted the meeting invitation, thinks she's coming to finalize the trust structure with her investors." Sarah's laugh was sharp. She even asked if she should bring champagne to celebrate. The cruelty of the ambush should have bothered Philip, but all he felt was cold satisfaction. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep playing the perfect husband. In fact, be extra attentive. Take her shopping for baby clothes. Post about your miracle on social media. We want documentation of your support right up until the reveal." That evening, Philip suggested dinner at Abigail's favorite restaurant. She seemed surprised but pleased, chattering about the baby as they drove through Atlanta traffic. "I've been thinking about names," she said, hand resting on her growing bump. "What about James? After your father?" Philip's father had died when he was 12. The fact that Abigail would invoke his memory for another man's child made his jaw clench. "That's thoughtful," he managed. "I want this baby to have connections to both of us," she continued, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "Even if the conception was unusual, he's still ours." The restaurant Tyler Brooks owned sat on a corner in Virginia Highland, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Philip had chosen it deliberately, curious if Abigail would react. She didn't even hesitate walking through the doors. "Table for 2, Philip told the hostess, watching Abigail scan the dining room. Was she looking for Brooks? Did she know he was in the hospital because of her? They were seated near the kitchen, close enough to hear the controlled chaos of service. Abigail ordered sparkling water with lime, playing the pregnant woman perfectly. "This is nice," she said, studying the menu. "We haven't been out just the 2 of us in months." "I wanted to celebrate," Philip said. "The ultrasound, finding out it's a boy. This is what we always wanted." Her eyes misted. "You really mean that? I know the pregnancy was a shock. Miracles usually are." He raised his water glass. "To our son. To our son," she echoed, and for a moment she looked like the woman he'd married. Vulnerable, hopeful, entirely convincing in her deception. The food was excellent, though Philip barely tasted it. He was too busy watching Abigail perform. Every gesture, every expression calibrated for maximum effect. How had he never noticed before? "Oh," she said suddenly, grabbing his hand and placing it on her stomach. "Feel that? He's kicking." Philip felt movement under his palm, another man's child stirring in his wife's womb. The baby she planned to sell to her sister like livestock. "Amazing," he said, and meant it. The capacity for human cruelty never ceased to amaze him. After dinner, they walked past boutique shops, Abigail pausing at a children's clothing store. "Can we look? Just for a minute?" Inside, she gravitated toward the expensive section, tiny Ralph Lauren outfits, designer onesies that cost more than most people's groceries. She held up a blue sweater smaller than Philip's hand. "Isn't it perfect?" she breathed. "Get it," Philip encouraged. "Get whatever you want." She looked at him with surprise. "Really? You've been so different lately, more engaged." "I'm trying to embrace this," Philip said truthfully. "Make the most of whatever time we have." If she noticed the ominous phrasing, she didn't show it. Instead, she kissed him right there in the store, surrounded by the trappings of a future that would never exist. Back home, as Abigail modeled the baby clothes for her sister via FaceTime, Philip retreated to his office. He had emails from Porter surveillance photos from the last week, financial records showing Abigail had moved another $50,000 to her secret accounts. But it was the final attachment that made his blood run cold. Security footage from a medical clinic, showing Abigail entering with a man who wasn't one of the five. The timestamp was from yesterday. Philip called Porter immediately. "Who is he?" "Dr. Victor Reeves, reproductive endocrinologist, specializes in selective reduction." Selective reduction? Abortion, but for multiple pregnancies. Reduces twins to singles, triplets to twins. But here's the thing, Abigail's only carrying one baby. The implication hit Philip like a physical blow. She's researching how to terminate if the scheme falls apart. "That's my read. She's creating exit strategies." Philip ended the call and sat in the darkness of his office, listening to Abigail laugh with her sister in the next room. In 3 days, her world would implode. But would it be soon enough to save the innocent life growing inside her? He opened his laptop and began typing an email to Sarah. "We need to move faster. She's planning something with the baby. Whatever happens Thursday, we need contingencies to protect the child." The response came within minutes. "Already on it. Filing emergency injunctions tomorrow. She won't be able to make any medical decisions without court approval. Trust me, Philip. We're going to save that baby." Philip hoped she was right, because while he'd started this journey seeking justice for himself, it had become about something more. A child conceived in greed deserved a chance at love, and Philip would burn down his entire life to ensure that happened. Tuesday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false spring that made Atlantans break out their shorts in February. Philip stood at the kitchen window, watching Abigail tend to her herb garden, her movements careful and deliberate around her growing belly. She looked serene, content, a woman without a care in the world. "Beautiful day," she said, coming inside with fresh basil. "Perfect for what I have planned." "What's that?" Philip asked, though dread already coiled in his stomach. "I want to have a party, a baby shower, but different. Co-ed, casual, just our closest friends and family." She began washing the herbs, her back to him. "This Saturday at the house. What do you think?" Saturday. 2 days after the confrontation at Sarah's office. "That sounds ambitious. Why so soon?" "I just have this feeling," she said, turning to face him. "Like we should celebrate while we can. Life's unpredictable, you know?" The irony of her words wasn't lost on Philip. "Who were you thinking of inviting?" "Oh, the usual crowd. My sister, obviously. Your brother from Charleston. Some people from work." She paused, seemingly casual. "And a few of the major donors from my charity events. They've been so supportive, I thought it would be nice to include them." There it was. She wanted to parade her conquest in front of her victims, probably hoping to secure more money in the guise of baby gifts. Philip forced a smile. "That's thoughtful. Need help with the planning?" Her eyes lit up. "Really? You'd help?" "Of course. This is our son we're celebrating." She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You've been amazing lately. I know the pregnancy started rough, but seeing you embrace it. She pulled back to look at him. I love you, Philip. Whatever happens, remember that. Whatever happens, he echoed. Just life, you know. It's been so perfect lately, sometimes I worry it can't last. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Pregnancy hormones making me paranoid. Philip kissed her forehead, tasting the salt of secret knowledge. Nothing's going to happen. We're going to have our party, have our baby, have our life. Promise, she whispered. I promise, he lied. That afternoon, Philip threw himself into party planning with an enthusiasm that clearly delighted Abigail. He suggested hosting it at Southern Comfort Tyler Brooks' restaurant. Oh, that's perfect, Abigail exclaimed. Tyler's been so generous to the Children's Fund. I'm sure he'd give us a good rate. I'll call and arrange it, Philip offered, knowing Brooks was still hospitalized, his restaurant being run by managers who had no idea their boss had been sleeping with the party planner. The call was brief, professional. Yes, they could accommodate a party of 50 on Saturday. Yes, they could do the special menu. The irony of planning Abigail's triumph celebration at her victim's restaurant wasn't lost on Philip. Invitations? Abigail asked, laptop open to a design website. Let me handle those, Philip said. You focus on the menu and decorations. She beamed at him. Look at us working together. It's like when we first got married, remember? That dinner party we threw for your promotion? Philip remembered. They'd been broke, serving spaghetti and cheap wine to his colleagues, laughing about their mismatched plates. Abigail had charmed everyone, the perfect corporate wife. When had that woman disappeared? While Abigail called vendors, Philip retreated to his office to design invitations. He created two versions, one innocent, one explosive. The innocent version went to family and friends. Join us in celebrating our miracle. Baby Morrison. Coming summer 2010. The second version, which would only be distributed after Thursday's meeting, told a different story, but that was for later. Philip? Abigail appeared in the doorway. I'm running to the store for ribbon samples. Want to come? Can't. Work call in 10 minutes. But here. He pulled out his credit card. Use this. Get whatever makes you happy. She took the card with obvious surprise. They hadn't shared finances this freely in months. You're sure? It's our baby shower. Spare no expense. After she left, Philip called Sarah. She's planning a party for Saturday, wants to invite all 5 men. Brilliant, Sarah said. Let her plan it. After Thursday, it'll become something very different, a public reckoning instead of a celebration. She seems nervous, like she suspects something. Guilty conscience, probably. Or she's picking up on subtle changes in the men's behavior. Porter says Chen has been avoiding her calls, and Matthews canceled their last meeting. What about Hayes and Lawson? Hayes is in damage control mode, trying to save his engagement. Lawson's wife kicked him out, so he's got bigger problems than Abigail right now. Philip felt a twinge of sympathy for the men, then reminded himself they'd all chosen to sleep with a married woman. Brooks? Released yesterday, but still fragile. His lawyer will definitely be at Thursday's meeting. Tyler won't be ready to face her. That evening, Abigail returned with bags full of baby shower supplies, blue ribbons, tiny elephant decorations, boxes of expensive chocolates shaped like baby bottles. She spread everything across the dining room table like a general planning a campaign. The color scheme is navy and silver, she announced. Classy but not too formal. And look, she held up a guest book shaped like an elephant. Everyone can write wishes for the baby. Perfect, Philip agreed, imagining those wishes after the truth came out. They spent the evening addressing invitations, Abigail's handwriting flowing across expensive cardstock. She hummed while she worked, occasionally stopping to rub her belly or adjust her position. There, she said finally, surveying the stack of completed invitations. 50 of our nearest and dearest. Including your donors? Of course. Derek already RSVP'd yes. So did Keith and Marcus. Corey's checking his calendar and Tyler. She frowned. I haven't been able to reach Tyler. Have you heard anything? Philip kept his expression neutral. Maybe he's traveling. Maybe. She seemed troubled but shook it off. Well, I'm sure he'll come if he's in town. He's been so invested in our journey. The casual cruelty of calling her deception our journey made Philip's jaw clench, but he maintained his facade, helping her stamp and seal each invitation like a good, supportive husband. Later, as they prepared for bed, Abigail stood before the bathroom mirror in her nightgown, studying her profile. "I'm really showing now," she said softly. Philip came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. In the mirror, they looked like the perfect couple, attractive, successful, expecting their first child. The image was so convincing he almost believed it himself. "You're beautiful," he said, meaning it despite everything. She was beautiful in the way poisonous flowers were beautiful, lovely to look at, deadly to touch. "Even with everything that's happened?" she asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "All the complications?" For a moment, Philip wondered if she was confessing. But no, she was fishing, trying to gauge his suspicions. "Especially with everything that's happened," he replied. "It makes this more precious." She turned in his arms, tears in her eyes. "I don't deserve you." Finally, Philip thought, something honest. "We deserve each other," he said instead, and kissed her goodnight. Wednesday dawned gray and drizzling, the false spring replaced by more typical February weather. Philip sat in his home office, watching the invitation tracker on his computer. The baby shower invites had been delivered, and RSVPs were already coming in, but those weren't the invitations that mattered. On his desk sat 5 identical envelopes, each containing a very different kind of invitation. Porter had helped him craft them, each one personalized to maximize impact. Mr. Hayes. Your presence is requested at the law offices of Mitchell & Associates Thursday 2 p.m. Urgent matter concerning Abigail Morrison and establishing paternity financial obligations. Discretion assured. Similar messages for Chen, Lawson, Matthews, and Brooks' attorney. Each hinted at different leverage Hayes' cocaine problem, Chen's family situation, Lawson's gambling debts, Matthews' insider trading. Just enough pressure to ensure attendance. "You sure about the personal delivery?" Porter asked over the phone. "I could have my guys handle it." "No," Philip said firmly. "I want to see their faces when they read them." His first stop was Biogenesis Technologies, Hayes' company. The gleaming office tower in Midtown reflected the gray sky like a mirror. Philip had dressed carefully his best suit, the watch Abigail had given him for their 5th anniversary. He looked like someone who belonged. "I have a delivery for Mr. Hayes," he told the receptionist. "Personal and confidential." "I can sign for it," she offered. "I'm afraid I need to hand it to him directly. It's a legal matter." Her expression shifted. In the corporate world, legal matter opened doors. One moment. Minutes later, Philip stood in Hayes' corner office. The man himself looked haggard, his usual polish cracked. The silver hair seemed duller. The expensive suit couldn't hide the stress weight loss. "Yes," Hayes said impatiently. "What's this about?" Philip handed him the envelope. "Thursday, 2 p.m. Don't be late." He watched Hayes open it, saw the color drain from his face as he read. Their eyes met the cuckold and the adulterer, facing each other across an expanse of marble and betrayal. "You're Philip Morrison," Hayes said slowly. "I am." "Does she know?" "Not yet, but she will on Thursday." Hayes sank into his chair. "My fiancée. Should have thought of that before you fucked my wife." Philip turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Hayes, if you try to warn Abigail, the photos go to your fiancé and the DEA. Are we clear?" The CEO nodded mutely. 1 down, 4 to go. Keith Lawson was in surgery, but Philip found him in the hospital cafeteria afterward, still in scrubs, exhaustion written in every line of his face. The doctor read the invitation twice, hands shaking. "This is about the baby," Lawson said. It wasn't a question. "Among other things. I have kids, a wife." "So did I," Philip replied. "See you Thursday." Corey Matthews took the meeting in his law office, all sharp angles and sharper suit. He read the invitation with a lawyer's eye, looking for loopholes. "Extortion is illegal," he said finally. "So is insider trading. Thursday, Matthews. Bring your checkbook." Marcus Chen was the hardest. Philip found him at his development site in Vinings, overseeing construction. The younger man's face crumbled as he read the invitation. "I loved her," Chen whispered. "I thought she loved me." "She loved your bank account," Philip said, but his tone was gentler. Of all of them, Chen seemed the most genuinely hurt. "Thursday. Help me stop her from doing this to others." The final delivery was to Brooks's attorney, a small woman named Patricia Morse, who looked like she could eat corporate lawyers for breakfast. "My client is in no condition," she began. "Your client tried to kill himself because of my wife's lies," Philip interrupted. "He can participate via video call or send you with full authority, but someone represents his interests on Thursday, or the media gets the full story." She studied him with sharp eyes. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone broken. You seem focused." "I am broken," Philip admitted, "but I'm going to use the pieces to cut her to ribbons." That evening, Abigail was buzzing with excitement about the baby shower, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. She'd spent the day shopping, her secret accounts no doubt lighter. "I found the perfect centerpieces," she gushed, showing him pictures on her phone. "Little elephant figurines holding blue balloons. Isn't that adorable?" "Adorable," Philip agreed, thinking of elephants in memory, how they never forgot a slight. "And the cake, oh, Philip, wait until you see the design. It's shaped like building blocks spelling out baby. The bakery said it'll feed 60 people. I thought we invited 50. Well, you know how these things go. People bring dates, extras show up." She smiled. "I want everyone to celebrate our miracle." Our miracle. The words were ash in his mouth. His phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. All 5 confirmed for tomorrow. Game on. "Who's that?" Abigail asked, ever watchful despite her cheer. "Just work. Deploy got moved to Friday." "Oh, good. Then you can help with shower setup on Saturday?" She kissed his cheek. "I'm going to call Rebecca. Update her on the plans." Philip listened to her chatter with her sister, catching fragments. "Philip's been amazing. Party will be perfect. Everything falling into place." If only she knew how accurate that last part was. That night, Philip lay awake thinking about the invitations, imagining them sitting on nightstands and desks across Atlanta. 5 men contemplating their sins, 1 woman oblivious to her impending doom. And somewhere in the darkness, a baby's heartbeat, innocent of all of it. The game board was set. Tomorrow, they'd play. Thursday morning broke crisp and clear, one of those perfect February days that made Atlanta shine. Philip woke to find Abigail already up, standing at their bedroom window in her silk robe, one hand resting on her belly. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She turned, smiling. The baby was active all night. "I think he's excited about something." "Big day?" "The trust meeting this afternoon, finally getting all the paperwork sorted." She crossed to the bed, sitting beside him. "After today, our son's future will be secure. Even if something happened to us, he'd be taken care of." The irony was suffocating. "That's important," Philip managed. "You know what? I'm going to dress up. Make an impression." She headed for the closet. First impressions matter, especially with potential trustees. Philip watched her select a designer dress, blue, of course, to match the baby shower theme she'd been obsessing over. Everything in Abigail's world was carefully coordinated, themed, orchestrated for maximum effect. "Actually," Philip said, "why don't you wear the red one? The one you wore to the hospital gala last year?" She paused. "Red? For a business meeting?" "You look powerful in red, trustworthy." She considered, then pulled out the red dress. "You're right, red it is." Philip smiled to himself. Red would be perfect for what was coming. The color of blood, of warning, of stop signs ignored. While Abigail showered, Philip checked his phone. Messages from all 5 men, ranging from threats, Matthews, to please, Chen, to stony silence, Hayes. Brooks' attorney had sent a formal notice that she would be attending with full authority to act on her client's behalf. Sarah texted, "Everything's ready, video equipment tested, documents prepared. Security on standby in case things get heated." Security. Philip hadn't considered violence, but then again, he was about to put 7 people in a room and destroy all their lives. Things could get ugly. "Breakfast?" Abigail called from the kitchen. "I made your favorite blueberry pancakes." The domesticity of it all made his chest tight. Here she was, playing the perfect wife, hours before her world imploded. He found her at the stove, humming, looking radiant in yoga pants and one of his old shirts. "Smells amazing," he said. "I woke up craving them. Pregnancy cravings are weird." She plated the pancakes, adding fresh berries and whipped cream. "Eat up. You've got that deployed today, right?" "Postponed to tomorrow, actually. Thought I might work from home. Catch up on documentation." "Perfect. You can help me with last-minute shower details." She sat across from him, pouring orange juice. "I keep thinking I'm forgetting something important." "You're forgetting that karma is real," Philip thought, but said, "I'm sure everything will be fine." They ate in companionable silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Abigail chatted about the shower who'd RSVP'd, what games to play, whether the chocolate fountain was too much. "Oh," she said suddenly, "Tyler finally called back. He's been sick, apparently. Some kind of breakdown? His manager was vague, but he promised to try to make the shower." "That's good," Philip said carefully. "I'm sure he wouldn't want to miss it. Right? He's been so invested in the baby journey. All of them have, really. Derek, Keith, Marcus, Corey, they've been like uncles to our little one already." The casual way she listed her lovers made Philip's fork pause midway to his mouth. "Uncles?" "Well, honorary uncles. Successful men who can be role models." She rubbed her belly. "Every child needs a village, right?" "Right," Philip agreed, thinking her village was about to be burned to the ground. After breakfast, Abigail disappeared into her office for trust paperwork review. Philip knew she was probably coordinating with the 5 men, making sure they'd all play their parts at the meeting. Little did she know they'd received very different stage directions. At noon, she emerged, dressed in the red dress, looking every inch the successful professional woman. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She'd even worn the diamond earrings Philip had given her for their anniversary, a touch of the devoted wife amid the power player facade. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning. "Like a woman who gets what she wants," Philip said honestly. She beamed. "Perfect. That's exactly the impression I need." She checked her phone. "The meeting's at 2. I should leave by 1:30. Traffic's always bad getting to Buckhead." "Drive carefully." "Always do. I'm carrying precious cargo, remember?" She patted her belly, then gathered her purse and documents. "Oh, I might be late. These trust things can drag on, and I want to make sure everything's ironclad." "Take your time," Philip said. "Get everything sorted properly." She kissed him goodbye, a real kiss, not the perfunctory pecks they'd been trading. For a moment she clung to him, and he wondered if some part of her sensed the approaching storm. "I love you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, know that I love you." "I know," Philip lied. "I love you too." After she left, Philip sat in the silence of their perfect house, surrounded by baby shower decorations and trust documents, and the debris of a marriage built on deception. In an hour, he'd drive to Sarah's office. In 2 hours, the show would begin. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through their photos, their wedding, vacations, celebrations. In every image, Abigail smiled at the camera while Philip smiled at her. He'd been so blind, so trusting. But perhaps that was what made him the perfect Mark, a man so desperate to believe in love that he'd ignore every red flag. Well, the flags were about to come down, all of them. His phone buzzed. "Porter. She just arrived at the building, valeted her car, went straight up. She has no idea you're coming." Philip stood, straightened his tie, and headed for the door. Time to crash his wife's party. The drive to Buckhead was surreal. Every familiar street felt foreign, like he was seeing Atlanta through new eyes. The city where he'd built his life, where he'd fallen in love, where that love had curdled into something poisonous. He parked in the garage beneath Sarah's building, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. He needed the physical activity, the burn in his muscles reminding him he was alive, he was real, this was happening. Sarah met him in the lobby of her floor. "Ready?" "No," Philip admitted. "But let's do it anyway." She squeezed his shoulder. "Remember, you're the victim here. Whatever happens in that room, whatever she says or does, you're the one she betrayed. Don't let her flip the script." "Is everyone here?" "All present and accounted for." I've kept them in separate rooms to prevent collision before the main event. Your wife's in the conference room, reviewing her trust documents, completely oblivious. Philip took a deep breath. Then let's give her something to remember. Sarah smiled, sharp as a blade. Oh, she'll remember this for the rest of her life, however long that is after today. They walked toward the conference room, Philip's footsteps echoing like a countdown. Behind that door sat his wife, pregnant with another man's child, preparing to formalize her scheme. Time to introduce her to consequences. The conference room at Mitchell & Associates occupied the corner of the building's 15th floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Buckhead's skyline. February sunlight streamed through the glass, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table where Abigail Morrison sat, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of a predator counting its prey. She wore the red dress like armor, her makeup flawless, every hair in place. The pregnancy had given her a glow that made her even more beautiful, or perhaps it was the anticipated triumph of her scheme finally coming to fruition. She didn't look up when the door opened. "Finally," she said, still scanning the trust paperwork. "I was beginning to think." The words died in her throat as she raised her head. Instead of the lawyer she expected, 5 men filed into the room, their faces masks of barely controlled emotion. Derek Hayes entered first, his usual swagger replaced by rigid tension. Keith Lawson followed, still in his hospital scrubs, dark circles under his eyes. Corey Matthews moved with a lawyer's precision, his expression unreadable. Marcus Chen looked lost, younger than his 34 years, clutching a manila folder. Patricia Morse, Tyler Brooks' attorney, brought up the rear, her sharp gaze taking in every detail. "What is this?" Abigail's voice came out higher than intended. "Why are you all—" "Sit down, Abigail." Sarah Mitchell entered, her presence commanding immediate attention. "We have business to discuss." "I don't understand. The trust meeting—" "Oh, we'll be discussing trusts," Sarah said smoothly. "Among other things. Gentlemen, Miss Morse, please take your seats." The men arranged themselves around the table like a tribunal, leaving Abigail isolated at one end. She gripped her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "I wouldn't bother texting your sister," Sarah advised. "She's been detained for questioning regarding her role in your enterprise." Abigail's face drained of color. "What are you talking about? Where's Mr. Hendricks? He's supposed to be handling the trust formation." "There is no Mr. Hendricks," Sarah replied. "That was a fiction designed to get you here. Though I must say, you came quite eagerly to formalize your fraud." "Fraud?" Abigail stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "I don't know what game you're playing, but the only game being played here is yours." Philip's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway fluorescence, and for a moment Abigail seemed to stop breathing. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, a protective gesture that might have been touching if it weren't so calculated. "Philip, what are you doing here?" "I'm here for the truth, Abigail. All of it." He entered the room, Porter and another man following behind him. "You remember Detective Porter, don't you? He's been very thorough in documenting your activities." Abigail's eyes darted between the faces around the table, reading the situation with growing horror. "This is insane! Philip, these men are donors to my charities." "Stop!" Hayes's voice was sharp with disgust. "Just stop. We know everything." "The payment schedules," Lawson added, pulling out his phone. "The ovulation calendar. The way you played us against each other. The fake emotions, the promises," Chen whispered, unable to meet her eyes. "I thought you loved me." Matthews laughed, bitter and harsh. "Love? She loved our bank accounts. Look." He slid a paper across the table. "Recognize this? It's your spreadsheet. The one where you calculated the optimal extraction rate from each of us." Abigail sank back into her chair, the performance finally cracking. But she wasn't done fighting. "Whatever you think you know. We know you're carrying Marcus Chen's baby," Philip interrupted. "DNA testing on the fetal cells confirmed Asian genetic markers. We know you've taken over 300,000 from these men in the past 6 months. We know about Robert Fletcher and the abortion 7 years ago after you collected your payout. Each revelation landed like a physical blow. Abigail's carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by something harder, more calculating. "You can't prove any of this in court," she said, the warm wife persona completely gone. "Gifts between consenting adults aren't illegal." "Fraud is," Sarah interjected, "as is embezzlement from charitable organizations, forgery of financial documents, and extortion." She opened a thick folder. "Would you like me to read the list of charges the DA is preparing?" "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sarah produced a document. "This is your signature on a withdrawal authorization for $150,000 from your joint investment account. Except you never had Philip's permission, did you? That's forgery, a felony." Porter stepped forward, placing a laptop on the table. "Should we play the audio recordings? The ones where you discuss the baby project with your sister? Or maybe the video from the fertility clinic, showing you meeting with Dr. Hartman, who, by the way, lost his license for falsifying paternity tests." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Abigail looked at each face around the table, perhaps searching for sympathy or weakness. She found neither. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice small. "I couldn't have children the normal way. Philip's sterile—" "Don't you dare!" Philip's voice was ice. "Don't you dare use my medical condition to justify this. We could have adopted. We could have used a sperm donor legally, ethically. Instead, you turned pregnancy into a con game." "With my husband," Hayes added with venom. "Did you think about his children when you were seducing me? Did you care about the families you were destroying?" "Tyler tried to kill himself." Patricia Morse spoke for the first time. "My client is in intensive therapy because he thought he'd finally have the child his wife couldn't give him. You gave him hope, then crushed it for money." Abigail's hand remained on her belly, but now the gesture seemed less protective and more like she was guarding an investment. "The baby is innocent in all this." "The only true thing you've said," Philip agreed, "which is why we're here. Sarah?" Sarah pulled out another set of documents. "Option 1. You sign over full custody to Marcus Chen, the biological father. You walk away with nothing, no money, no claims, no contact. The fraud charges disappear, though the embezzlement case proceeds. You'll likely get probation and restitution." "Never," Abigail snarled. "Option 2, Sarah continued calmly. "We proceed with all charges: fraud, embezzlement, extortion, forgery. With the evidence we have, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. The baby will be born in prison and immediately placed with the biological father anyway." "You can't." Option 3. This time Philip spoke, his voice steady despite the emotion burning in his eyes. "You sign the divorce papers, sign away custody, and leave Atlanta. Today. You get 24 hours to pack and you never contact any of us again. The baby goes to a loving home, and you get to start over somewhere else." Abigail looked around the table wildly. "This is kidnapping. Coercion. This is consequence," Matthews said flatly. "Something you never figured into your spreadsheets." "I'll go to the media," Abigail threatened. "Tell them how Atlanta's elite tried to steal my baby." "Go ahead," Sarah invited. "I'm sure they'd love to hear about your pregnancy fraud scheme. We have all the documentation ready for release, including your journal, where you detailed every manipulation, every lie, every calculated seduction." That landed. Abigail went pale. "You went through my things?" "Just like you went through theirs," Philip gestured to the 5 men. "Medical records, financial statements, family secrets. You invaded their privacy for profit. Turnabout seems fair." Chen finally looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I would have loved you," he said quietly. "If you'd just been honest, I would have given you everything. A real family, a real life. Instead, you made me a mark in your con game." Something flickered in Abigail's eyes, regret. Or just calculation of a new angle. "Marcus, Don't," he cut her off. "I've already talked to my lawyer. If you give me custody, I'll raise our son with love. He'll never know his mother was a criminal." "Criminal?" Abigail's voice rose. "I'm a criminal for wanting a child? For wanting security?" "You're a criminal for fraud," Porter said bluntly. "For theft. For destroying lives out of greed." The room fell silent again. Outside, Atlanta bustled on, oblivious to the drama playing out in the conference room. Abigail sat frozen, her empire crumbling around her, facing the united front of her victims. Finally she spoke, her voice different, older, tired. If I give up the baby, what guarantee do I have that you won't pursue charges anyway? Sarah produced a final document. Immunity agreement, binding on all parties. You walk away clean except for the embezzlement charges, which the charity is pursuing separately, but only if you sign now. This offer expires when you leave this room. Abigail read through the papers, her face a mask. The room held its breath as she picked up the pen Sarah offered. I need assurances about the baby, she said. That he'll be cared for, educated. You don't get to make demands, Philip said coldly. You lost that right when you decided to harvest a child for profit. For a long moment, Abigail stared at him, the husband she'd betrayed, the man whose greatest pain she'd weaponized. Then she signed the papers with quick, angry strokes. There, she threw the pen down. Satisfied? Not even close, Philip replied. But it's a start. Abigail stood, gathering her purse with shaking hands. At the door, she turned back. I did love you, Philip, in the beginning. I know, Philip said quietly. That's what makes this so much worse. She left then, the click of her heels fading down the hallway. The room exhaled collectively, the tension breaking like a fever. Gentlemen, Sarah said, Miss Morse, thank you for your cooperation. Mr. Chen, we'll need to discuss custody arrangements. The rest of you are free to go, though I'd recommend therapy. All of you. As the men filed out, each lost in their own thoughts, Philip remained seated. Porter put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, the detective said. Not many men could have handled that with such control. Philip laughed, hollow and exhausted. Control? I wanted to destroy her. Part of me still does. But you didn't, Sarah observed. You gave her a way out. That's more than she deserved. It wasn't for her, Philip admitted. It was for the baby. Every child deserves better than being born from revenge. Outside, the February sun was beginning to set, painting Atlanta's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the city, Abigail Morrison was packing her life into boxes, her carefully constructed world in ruins. And somewhere else, 5 men were going home to face their own reckonings with wives, families, consciences. But in the conference room, Philip Morrison sat quietly, finally free of the woman who'd turned his greatest sorrow into her greatest scheme. The war was over. Now came the harder part, learning to live with the peace. The Buckhead Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered with Saturday afternoon light, transformed into a baby shower wonderland of navy and silver. Elephant-themed centerpieces adorned each table, blue balloons floated in carefully arranged clusters, and a chocolate fountain bubbled in the corner. The cake and architectural marvel spelling out baby in fondant blocks held court on the dessert table. But the guest of honor was nowhere to be found. Philip stood near the entrance, greeting confused guests as they arrived. His brother David had flown in from Charleston. Abigail's extended family clustered near the bar, and various friends and colleagues milled about, checking their phones and murmuring. "Where's Abigail?" asked Margaret Wilson, Abigail's aunt. "It's not like her to be late to her own party." "There's been a development," Philip said carefully. He'd rehearsed this moment with Sarah, knowing the truth would have to come out eventually. "If everyone could take their seats, I have an announcement." The crowd settled reluctantly, curiosity and concern rippling through the room. Philip noticed several familiar faces in the back, reporters from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Channel 2 News, tipped off by Porter about a significant story involving Atlanta's elite. "Thank you all for coming," Philip began, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I know you're here to celebrate what you believed was a miracle pregnancy, but I'm afraid I have difficult news to share." The room fell silent. Even the chocolate fountain seemed to quiet its bubbling. Yesterday, Abigail Morrison signed documents relinquishing all parental rights to the child she carries. She has left Atlanta permanently. Philip paused, letting that sink in. She will not be returning. Gasps and murmurs erupted. Margaret Wilson stood abruptly. What are you talking about? Where's my niece? Your niece, Philip said, orchestrated one of the most calculated frauds I've ever encountered. The pregnancy wasn't a miracle, it was a business plan. On cue, Porter wheeled in a projection screen. The first image appeared. Abigail's spreadsheet, names and dollar amounts clearly visible. For the past 8 months, my wife systematically seduced 5 wealthy men with the express purpose of getting pregnant and collecting child support from all of them. The room exploded. Shouts, denials, chairs scraping as people stood. Philip raised his hand for silence. I have documented evidence of everything. Email exchanges, financial records, even her personal journal detailing the entire scheme. The projector clicked to the next slide excerpts from Abigail's journal, her clinical descriptions of each seduction. This is outrageous, Abigail's cousin Linda shouted. You're slandering her because she's not here to defend herself. Am I? Philip clicked to the next slide bank statements showing the deposits from each man. $300,000 in 8 months. Payments from Derek Hayes, Keith Lawson, Corey Matthews, Marcus Chen, and Tyler Brooks. All documented, all traceable. Those men. Margaret Wilson sank back into her chair. They were at her charity events. She said they were donors. They were, Philip said grimly. Just not the kind of donation you thought. The journalists were frantically taking notes, cameras capturing every reaction. Philip knew this would be on the evening news, probably make national headlines. Good. Let everyone know what Abigail Morrison was capable of. But the baby, someone called out. What happens to the baby? The biological father has accepted custody. The child will be raised in a loving home, never knowing his mother viewed him as a commodity. You're lying, Linda insisted, though her voice wavered. Abigail wouldn't. She couldn't. Porter stepped forward, handing out copies of key documents to the journalists. Ma'am, I'm a licensed private investigator. Every piece of evidence, mister, Morrison has presented has been verified. Your cousin didn't just betray her husband, she committed fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Where's Rebecca? Margaret asked suddenly. Abigail's sister, where is she? Currently explaining to investigators her role in the scheme, Philip replied. Apparently, she was promised the baby in exchange for providing confidential information on the men Abigail targeted. The revelation sent another shockwave through the room. Philip watched as understanding dawned on faces all those charity events, all those late nights, all those generous donors, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. David Morrison approached his brother. Philip, why didn't you tell me? I could have what? Philip asked. Stopped her? She had 5 men convinced they were in love. She had her own family helping her. She even had a corrupt doctor ready to falsify paternity tests. This was bigger than just a cheating spouse, David. This was organized crime in a designer dress. The chocolate fountain chose that moment to malfunction, sending a spray of chocolate across the nearest table. Somehow it seemed appropriate, the perfect party dissolving into chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, Philip addressed the room again. I apologize for bringing you here under false pretenses, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. The woman you thought you knew, the marriage you thought you were celebrating, none of it was real. This is your fault, Linda accused, tears streaming down her face. You couldn't give her children, so she had to... Stop. Philip's voice was sharp. My medical condition didn't make her a criminal. We had options. Legal, ethical options. She chose fraud instead. Channel 2's reporter, Casey Williams, raised her hand. Mr. Morrison, do you have a statement for our viewers? Philip looked directly into the camera. Yes. To anyone watching who's been a victim of fraud, whether financial or emotional, you're not alone. Don't be ashamed to seek help. And to those who think they can weaponize human relationships for profit, you will be caught. Truth has a way of surfacing. What will you do now? Another reporter asked. Rebuild, Philip said simply. Heal, move forward, and make sure nothing like this ever happens to anyone else I care about. The party dissolved quickly after that. Guests fled in embarrassment and shock, the elephant centerpieces watching with painted eyes as the celebration became an evacuation. Margaret Wilson approached Philip before leaving. Her face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I'm sorry, she whispered. We should have seen, should have known. She fooled everyone, Philip said, not unkindly. That's what narcissists do. They're very, very good at it. Soon, only Philip, David, and Porter remained in the ballroom. The cake sat untouched, baby, slowly melting under the lights. "You okay?" David asked. Philip considered the question. His marriage was over. His reputation would be gossip fodder for months. His carefully built life lay in ruins around him. And yet... "Yeah," he said, surprised to find it was true. "For the first time in months, I'm okay." Porter's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then hung up with a grim expression. "Abigail's flight just took off. She's headed to Miami, then connecting to Costa Rica. Country's got no extradition treaty with the U.S. "She planned even that," Philip marveled. "Every detail, every contingency." "Except you," Porter observed. "She never planned on you fighting back." Philip looked around the ruined party, the abandoned dreams, the truth laid bare for all to see. Tomorrow, Atlanta would wake to headlines about the scandal. Hayes's engagement would be over. Lawson would be fighting for his marriage. Matthews would face scrutiny over his affairs. Chen would be learning to be a single father. Brooks would continue his recovery. But today, in this ballroom full of broken illusions, Philip Morrison had won something more valuable than revenge. He'd won his freedom. "Let's go," he told his brother. "Nothing left here worth saving." As they left, Philip didn't look back at the party that never was. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Abigail was flying toward her new life, leaving wreckage in her wake. But Philip was done being wreckage. It was time to rebuild. 6 months later, the Fulton County Courthouse buzzed with unprecedented media attention. News vans lined the street, reporters jostled for position, and security had been tripled for what the press had dubbed the baby trap trial of the century. Philip adjusted his tie outside courtroom 5A, Sarah Mitchell beside him reviewing notes. Through the glass doors, he could see the packed gallery journalists, curious citizens, and the families whose lives Abigail had shattered. "Ready?" Sarah asked. "As ready as anyone can be to face their ex-wife in court," Philip replied. The doors opened, and they entered to a barrage of camera flashes. Despite fleeing to Costa Rica, Abigail had been arrested 2 months ago when she'd foolishly returned to Miami for medical treatment. Pregnancy complications had forced her hand, and U.S. Marshals had been waiting. There she sat at the defendant's table, no longer glowing with pregnancy. She'd given birth in custody 6 weeks ago, the baby immediately placed with Marcus Chen as per the signed agreements. Orange jumpsuit replaced designer dresses, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, but her eyes remained calculating, scanning the room like a predator even in chains. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman," the bailiff announced. Judge Coleman, a formidable woman in her 60s, took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes. "Before we begin, let me make something clear. This courtroom will maintain order. Any outbursts, any disruptions, and I will clear the gallery. Am I understood?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The state of Georgia versus Abigail Morrison. Charges include fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy. How does the defendant plead? Abigail's court-appointed attorney, a harried-looking man named Peterson, stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor." "Very well. Prosecution, your opening statement." Assistant District Attorney Michelle Reeves rose, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Your Honor, the state will prove that Abigail Morrison orchestrated one of the most calculated cruel frauds in Georgia history. She weaponized pregnancy itself, turning the miracle of life into a profit scheme that destroyed multiple families and defrauded victims of over $500,000. Reeves clicked a remote, and Abigail's spreadsheet appeared on the courtroom screen. Gasps echoed from the gallery. The defendant didn't just cheat on her husband. She created a business model out of infidelity, complete with profit projections, ovulation scheduling, and victim profiles. She selected 5 successful men, seduced them systematically, and planned to extract child support from all of them while hiding behind her sterile husband's inability to contest paternity. Philip felt every eye in the room turn to him. He kept his gaze forward, refusing to be ashamed of his medical condition. "We will present evidence including financial records, email communications, and the defendant's own journal documenting her crimes. We will hear from her victims not just the men she defrauded, but their families, their children, whose lives she destroyed for greed. Reeves sat down. Peterson rose, clearly overwhelmed by the case he'd inherited. Your Honor, my client maintains that all relationships were consensual, all money given freely. There was no fraud, only a woman desperate for a child, making perhaps unwise but not criminal choices. Even Peterson didn't sound convinced by his own words. Call your first witness, Judge Coleman ordered. The state calls Robert Fletcher. Philip watched as Abigail's ex-husband took the stand. 7 years had aged him, but his testimony was clear and damning. He told the court about Abigail's first attempt at pregnancy fraud, the $300,000 she'd extracted before terminating the pregnancy. She told me she miscarried, Fletcher said, voice tight with old pain. I found out later from medical records that it was an abortion. She never intended to have that baby. It was always about money. Objection, Peterson called. Relevance to current charges? Goes to pattern of behavior, Your Honor, Reeves responded. Overruled. Continue. The parade of witnesses was devastating. Derek Hayes testified about the cocaine habit Abigail had exploited, using his addiction as leverage. Keith Lawson's wife took the stand, tears streaming as she described finding the photos, learning about her husband's gambling debts that Abigail had discovered and used. She knew exactly how to find their weaknesses, Mrs. Lawson said, like she had a handbook on destroying marriages. Marcus Chen's testimony was the most emotional. He held photos of the son he was now raising alone. I loved her, he said simply. I thought we had something real. Finding out I was just a sperm donor with a bank account. It nearly broke me. But then I look at my son, and I think at least something beautiful came from all that ugliness. Day 2 brought Tyler Brooks to the stand via video link, still too fragile to appear in person. His testimony about his suicide attempt left several jurors in tears. My wife and I had tried for years to have children, Brooks said, voice hollow. When Abigail told me she was pregnant, possibly with my child, I thought God had finally answered our prayers. Learning it was all a scheme, that I was one of 5. I didn't want to live in a world where someone could be that cruel. Mr. Brooks, Reeves asked gently, how do you feel now? Grateful to be alive, angry at being fooled, but mostly sad that greed could corrupt something as precious as creating life. When Philip finally took the stand on day 3, the courtroom was silent. He told his story simply: the motorcycle accident, the diagnosis, the years of believing his wife had accepted their childless fate. When did you first suspect? Reeves asked. When she told me she was pregnant. I knew it was medically impossible for me to be the father. But even then, I wanted to believe there was some explanation other than betrayal. What made you investigate? Philip looked directly at Abigail for the first time. The lies. They started small: where she was going, who she was meeting. But lies compound. Eventually, the truth becomes inevitable. Mr. Morrison, how has this affected you? Philip considered the question. I lost my wife, my marriage, my trust in people. But I gained something too, the knowledge that I can survive betrayal. That truth matters more than comfortable lies. Peterson's cross-examination was perfunctory. What defense could there be against documented evidence and Philip's quiet dignity? Detective Porter testified next, walking the jury through his investigation with methodical precision. The emails, the financial records, the surveillance photos, each piece of evidence adding another bar to Abigail's cage. But the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. The state calls Rebecca Walsh. Abigail's sister took the stand looking haggard, her own legal troubles evident in her hunched shoulders. In exchange for immunity, she'd agreed to testify. Tell us about the plan, Reeves prompted. Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. Abigail came to me after learning Philip was sterile. She knew I couldn't have children after my hysterectomy. She said we could help each other. She'd have a baby. I'd raise it. We'd split the child support money. Was this presented as a one-time arrangement? No. Rebecca glanced at her sister. She had plans for surrogates, for repeating the process. She called it the baby business, said wealthy men were always careless with their sperm and their money. The callousness of it sent a ripple of disgust through the gallery. I provided information on the men from my job at the background check company. Financial records, medical histories, psychological profiles. Abigail used it all to customize her approach to each target. "Why did you agree to this?" Reeves asked. Rebecca finally broke down. "I wanted a baby so badly. After my surgery, I thought I'd never be a mother. Abigail promised me that dream. I let desire blind me to the evil of what we were doing." When Abigail finally took the stand in her own defense, Philip barely recognized her. Gone was any pretense of the loving wife, replaced by a cold strategist defending her business model. "I gave those men exactly what they wanted," she testified. "Attention, affection, excitement. If they chose to give me gifts, that was their decision." "And the pregnancy?" Reeves pressed. "Was that a gift too?" "I wanted a child. They wanted to feel virile. It was a mutual benefit situation." "What about your husband? Where was his benefit?" Abigail's mask slipped for just a moment. "Philip couldn't give me children. I found another way. Any wife would do the same. Any wife would systematically seduce 5 men, document it like a business plan, and commit fraud." Reeves's voice dripped contempt. "I did what I had to do." "No, Miss Morrison. You did what you wanted to do. There's a difference." Closing arguments brought the full scope of Abigail's crimes into focus. The prosecution painted her as a calculating predator who'd commercialized pregnancy and weaponized male vulnerability. The defense tried to portray her as a desperate woman driven by maternal instinct, but even they seemed unconvinced. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. On the count of fraud in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of embezzlement? Guilty. On the count of forgery? Guilty. On the count of conspiracy? Guilty. Abigail stood stoic as each verdict was read, but Philip saw her hands tremble slightly. The woman who'd planned everything hadn't planned for this. "Abigail Morrison," Judge Coleman's voice was stern, "you have been found guilty on all counts. This court has seen many cases of fraud, but rarely one so calculated, so cruel. You didn't just steal money, you stole trust, love, and hope from multiple victims. You commercialized pregnancy and turned the miracle of life into a commodity." The judge paused, looking directly at Abigail. "This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison, followed by 10 years probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. You are permanently barred from contacting any of the victims or the child you bore. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none for your crimes." As guards led Abigail away, she turned one last time. Her eyes found Philip's across the courtroom. For a moment, he saw something almost like regret. Then it was gone, replaced by the calculating stare he'd come to know so well. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Philip pushed through them, Sarah and David flanking him. "Mr. Morrison, how do you feel about the verdict?" "Justice was served," Philip said simply. "Now I just want to move forward." "Will you ever trust again?" another reporter called. Philip paused at his car, considering. "Yes," he said finally, "because the alternative is letting her win, and I'm done letting Abigail Morrison dictate my life." As they drove away from the courthouse, Philip felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year closure. Abigail would serve her time, the victims would receive restitution, and somewhere in Atlanta, a little boy would grow up loved by a father who'd wanted him despite the circumstances of his conception. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was just. 2 years later, the morning fog rolled across San Francisco Bay as Philip Morrison stood on his balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. The Victorian townhouse in Pacific Heights was smaller than his Atlanta mansion, but felt more like home than that showplace ever had. His phone buzzed a text from David back in Charleston. "Check your email. You'll want to see this." Philip opened the message to find a news article. "Abigail Morrison released early for good behavior, whereabouts unknown." He stared at the headline for a moment, waiting for the familiar surge of anger or pain. Instead, he felt nothing, or rather, a blessed indifference. Abigail had become a chapter in his past, not a ghost haunting his present. "Everything okay?" a voice asked from the doorway. Philip turned to see Kylie Chen Marcus's cousin, ironically enough wrapped in his robe, her dark hair tousled from sleep. They'd met at a grief support group 18 months ago, two people navigating the aftermath of betrayal. She'd lost her husband in Afghanistan. He'd lost his wife to greed. Somehow their broken pieces had fit together. "Abigail's out of prison," Philip said, showing her the article. Kylie studied it, then studied him. "How do you feel about that?" "Free," Philip realized. "She's out of prison, but I've been free for a while now." Kylie smiled, the expression lighting up her whole face. "Good. Now come inside. Emma and Ryan are making pancakes, and I'm pretty sure they're destroying your kitchen." Philip followed her in to find her two children, Emma, 8, and Ryan, 6, covered in flour and grinning proudly beside a stack of lopsided pancakes. "We made breakfast," Ryan announced. "I see that," Philip said, surveying the disaster zone that was his kitchen. 6 months ago, the mess would have stressed him out. Now it just made him laugh. "Did any flour actually make it into the pancakes?" "Some," Emma said seriously. "Maybe 30%. 30% is passing," Philip declared, ruffling her hair. "Let's eat." As they sat around the breakfast table, Ryan chattering about his upcoming soccer game and Emma explaining her science project, Philip marveled at how different his life had become. These weren't his biological children, might never legally be his, but he loved them with a fierce protectiveness he'd never expected to feel. "Oh," Kylie said, "I forgot to tell you. Marcus called yesterday. He wants to know if we can do lunch Sunday. He's bringing little James." Philip nodded. One of the strangest outcomes of the whole ordeal had been his friendship with Marcus Chen. The man who'd fathered a child with Philip's ex-wife had become one of his closest friends. They'd bonded over their shared betrayal, and when Marcus discovered his cousin Kylie was dating Philip, he'd given his blessing with characteristic grace. "Tell him yes. I'd like to see how James is doing." The boy was 3 now, a bright, curious child who looked nothing like his mother except for her green eyes. Marcus was raising him with the help of his parents, who'd forgiven their son's mistakes and embraced their unexpected grandchild. Sometimes Philip looked at James and felt a pang for the children he'd never have, but mostly he felt grateful the boy had escaped his mother's influence. After breakfast, as the kids got ready for school, Kylie pulled Philip aside. "You know she might try to contact you, right? Now that she's out?" "She might," Philip agreed. "But the restraining order is still in effect. And honestly, I don't think she will. We're both different people now. That chapter is closed." Kylie kissed him gently. "You've come so far from the angry man in that support group." "So have you from the widow who wouldn't talk to anyone." "Look at us," she laughed. "Two broken people making something whole." Later that morning, Philip dropped the kids at school a routine that still felt surreal and wonderful, then headed to his office in the financial district. Morrison Software Solutions was smaller than his old corporate job, but more fulfilling. He'd started it with his settlement money from the divorce, building something that was entirely his. "Morning, boss." His assistant, Janet, greeted him. "You've got a conference call with Seattle at 10, and Sarah Mitchell called. Says it's not urgent, but wants to catch up." Philip smiled. Sarah had become a friend after the trial, checking in periodically to make sure he was healing. She'd even visited last Christmas, pronouncing Kylie, "Good enough for my favorite client," which is saying something. The morning flew by in meetings and code reviews. Around lunch, Philip found himself in a coffee shop near the office, waiting for his order, when he heard a familiar laugh. His blood chilled before his brain even processed why. There, at a corner table, sat Abigail. She looked different, thinner, her hair shorter and darker, expensive clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. But it was unmistakably her. She was with a man Philip didn't recognize, leaning in close, laughing at something he'd said. For a moment, Philip considered leaving, avoiding the confrontation. Then he realized he didn't need to run. This woman had no power over him anymore. As if sensing his gaze, Abigail looked up. Their eyes met across the coffee shop. Philip watched emotions flicker across her face, surprise, fear, something that might have been regret. The man with her followed her gaze, confused. Philip nodded once, a simple acknowledgement of her existence, then collected his coffee and walked out. He didn't look back, didn't wonder what she was doing in San Francisco or who the man was. It didn't matter. She was a stranger now, someone he used to know in a different life. His phone rang as he walked back to the office. Kylie. "Hey," she said. "I know this is random, but Ryan just called me from school. He forgot his show and tell item and is apparently devastated. Any chance you could—" "Already heading to my car," Philip interrupted, smiling. "What am I looking for?" "His rock collection. He wants to explain sedimentary versus igneous to his class." "Of course he does. Tell him I'll be there in 20 minutes. You're the best. Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not since this morning," Philip teased. "Well, I do. See you tonight." As Philip drove toward Ryan's school, he passed the coffee shop where Abigail sat planning her next move with her next mark. Once, that knowledge would have consumed him with rage and a need to warn the man. Now, he simply felt pity for both of them. His life was no longer defined by what Abigail had done to him. It was defined by morning pancakes and rock collections, by Kylie's laughter and Emma's homework questions, by the software company he'd built, and the friendships he'd forged from the ashes of betrayal. That evening, as the four of them sat around the dinner table, Kylie helping Emma with math while Philip and Ryan built a Lego castle, Philip's phone chimed with an email. It was from an unknown address, but he recognized the writing style immediately. "Philip, I know I have no right to contact you. I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I took from you, from us, from everyone I hurt. Prison gave me time to think, to finally be honest with myself. I'm getting help now, real help. I hope you found happiness. You deserve it." Philip read it twice, then deleted it. There was nothing to say, no response that would change anything. Abigail was facing her demons, and he genuinely hoped she'd overcome them. But that was her journey, not his. "Everything okay?" Kylie asked, noticing his distraction. "Everything's perfect," Philip said, meaning it. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Ryan, Emma, dishes, please." "But we're building," Ryan protested. "The castle will wait. Responsibilities first, fun second." As the kids grumbled their way to the kitchen, Kylie studied him. "You sure you're okay?" "I am," Philip assured her. "I really am." Later that night, after the kids were asleep and Kylie was reading in bed, Philip stood again on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Abigail was starting over, hopefully without leaving destruction in her wake. The 5 men she'd betrayed had moved on. Hayes in therapy with his wife, Lawson divorced but healing, Matthews in a real relationship for the first time, Brooks running a non-profit for suicide prevention, and Marcus Chen was raising a wonderful son who would grow up knowing he was loved, wanted, chosen, everything his mother had failed to understand about what made a child precious. As for Philip Morrison, the sterile man who'd discovered his wife's betrayal in the cruelest way possible, he'd found something he'd never expected, a family that chose him, a love built on truth rather than lies, and a future that looked nothing like the one he'd planned but everything like the one he needed. The fog rolled in from the bay, softening the city lights into something dreamlike and beautiful. Philip went inside to his new life, closing the door on the past once and for all. In the bedroom, Kylie looked up from her book. "Coming to bed?" "Yeah," Philip said, sliding in beside her. "I'm home." And for the first time in his life, he truly was.